Chapter 101, Level 4 Alchemy and Hermione's Invitation. Inside the Johnny Silverhand store, John stood in his cauldron room, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. Alchemy has finally been upgraded, he announced, setting down the necklace he had been holding. This particular piece, an obsidian-like necklace, was part of the Johnny Silverhand series. Named the Silent Heart, its primary function was to shield its wearer from external probing, while simultaneously preventing their inner thoughts from being transmitted. This very necklace had played a crucial role during their covert operation at Shafiq Manor. However, the Silent Heart had its drawbacks. After each use, its pendant required replacement. This pendant, a rudimentary version of the magic remnant stone, was a flawed product John had crafted based on instructions from Nicole Flamel's handbook. Its sole purpose was to store and release magical power, with the real essence of the Silent Heart residing in its chain. Level 3 alchemy was insufficient for refining the Sorcerer's Stone. Now, with an upgrade, I should be able to enhance the version, John mused. He had committed Nicole Flamel's teachings to memory, understanding that mastering these complex concepts would further his alchemical skills. Flamel had generously shared his knowledge, aiming to shield John from undue attention and discourage him from becoming overly fixated on his legacy. In John's eyes, Nicole Flamel was more than a mentor, he was a guiding light. Intent on fulfilling his role as Flamel's successor, John set to work on crafting his version of the Sorcerer's Stone. After some effort, he produced a stone the size of a lavender pigeon egg, which he decided to call the Magic Crystal. Unlike the legendary Philosopher's Stone, this magic crystal couldn't concoct the elixir of life, but it could mimic some of its other remarkable abilities. Holding the magic crystal in one hand and a spoon in the other, John focused intently. Gradually, the spoon transformed, taking on a golden sheen until it was indistinguishable from real gold. Upon examining the newly gold spoon, John found it to be a perfect replica. The magic crystal, however, had darkened slightly, indicating it had expended about a tenth of its power. If this were the Philosopher's Stone, such a power expenditure would be trivial. It seems further improvements are necessary, John concluded, storing the magic crystal away and tossing the golden spoon into a drawer. He contemplated using his points to immediately upgrade his alchemy level further, but decided against it, fearing potential instability. It's better to wait until my current level is fully consolidated, he reasoned. After leaving the cauldron room, John briefed Tang Mi on some tasks before casting a disillusionment spell and exiting the Johnny Silverhand store. Meanwhile, the Wicks had been staying in London for nearly a week. Initially, Papa Watson Wick and Mr. Granger bonded over golf, but their friendship quickly deepened, leading to an unexpected turn of events. On the third day, after enjoying some wine by the river, Mr. Watson and Mr. Granger encountered a young woman from the clinic. In a moment of inebriated judgment, they accepted her invitation for a drink. However, their outing was cut short when Mrs. Wick and Mrs. Granger, having baked together and formed their own bond, arrived on the scene. The confrontation was dramatic, with Watson's newly fitted ceramic teeth nearly becoming a casualty. In a bid to protect his friend, Watson bravely took the blame, asserting that the young woman had been there to see him. This act of loyalty infuriated Mrs. Wick, who was already preparing to address the situation. Mr. Granger, witnessing Watson's sacrifice, was deeply moved by his friend's gesture. Loyalty bound them, and as they exchanged affectionate glances, a classic saying from the Celestial Dynasty echoed in their minds: "Do not wish to be born on the same day of the same month of the same year, but to die on the same day of the same month of the same year." It was as if the theme song of their friendship played in the background, celebrating the joy of finding a true friend in each other, much like the way peach blossoms bloom brightly in honor of such a bond. The story took an unexpected turn when Mr. Granger revealed a humorous mishap. He confessed that his wife's relentless pursuit and 3 determined visits to the clinic had driven Mrs. Granger to the brink. The situation escalated into a comical chase, resulting in both Mr. Granger and his friend being accidentally struck by a toy car. This minor accident led to a dramatic fall down some steps, and they ended up in the hospital, their injuries bonding them further. The hospital stay cooled down the tempers of their wives, and the two men, now wary of further mischief, decided to steer clear of any more trouble. Amidst the chaos, the young woman involved managed to slip away, leaving the incident unresolved. John returned to his father's apartment, a modest place provided by the company his father worked for. Despite his unassuming appearance, his father was considered an elite within the company. Upon entering, John found his father, Watson, struggling to open the refrigerator for a beer. John, seizing the beer, left Watson lamenting his fate. Watson, now sober and feeling sorry for himself, remembered Mrs. Wick's warning that if he didn't behave, she would entrust his care to Andre, one of John's uncles known for his formidable strength and intimidating presence. Just then, a knock on the door interrupted Watson's thoughts. Expecting his friend Mr. Granger, he was surprised to find Hermione Granger instead, looking for John. Hermione, usually seen with a book in hand, had opted for casual attire this time. Watson, with a hint of mischief, informed her that John was available. Hermione invited John to go out, marking the first time she had asked a wizard classmate to join her outside of school activities. John, having no other plans, accepted. To his surprise, Hermione led him to a park, a place devoid of magic and wizards, a setting that felt strangely unfamiliar to John after his time at Hogwarts. As they walked, Hermione shared that the park was a place she often visited, a place where she felt most at ease despite feeling unwelcome elsewhere. John realized that Hermione, much like himself, had faced challenges in fitting in. He remembered how even Harry and Ron had initially been wary of Hermione. Yet over time, John had become Hermione's first friend at Hogwarts, a bond she cherished deeply. Hermione had always stood by John, even when others doubted him, showing a level of care and loyalty that went beyond mere friendship. As they reached a swing set, Hermione hesitated, hoping John would push her on the swing. Instead, she found him already enjoying himself on another swing. Watching him, a mix of amusement and fondness crossed her face. After a moment of contemplation, she joined him, embracing the simple joy of the moment, a testament to their unique and enduring friendship. For a considerable time, Hermione harbored a question that she couldn't suppress any longer. "John, why did you decide to befriend me?" she inquired. Their initial encounter was anything but cordial. John, who had been swinging high into the air at the time, responded with a nonchalance that belied the depth of his answer. Friendship is all about the connection of feelings. Hermione felt a twinge of sadness at his words. Was it merely a matter of feeling that led him to comment on her prominent teeth? Lately, Hermione had been wrestling with a sense of inadequacy, especially when she considered her inability to assist Harry in the same daring manner as Ron, who had the adventure of rescuing Harry from the Dursleys with a flying car. Her contributions seemed to pale in comparison, and it weighed heavily on her. Noticing her dispirited mood, John alighted from the swing and approached her with a gravity that was uncharacteristic of their previous exchanges. "Hermione, it's crucial that you confront your true self. You possess a heart that's both noble and courageous, complemented by a boundless intellect," he asserted with sincerity. "Our friendship isn't predicated on grand gestures of sacrifice, but on the profound connection between our hearts." John's earnest reassurance lifted the cloud of gloom that had settled over Hermione. "Thank you, John," she expressed, her spirits buoyed by his words. When she looked up to meet his gaze, she found that he had already wandered over to the ice cream truck parked by the roadside. He glanced back at her, an ice cream cone already in hand, and inquired about her preferred flavor. Caught slightly off guard by the swift change in topic, Hermione replied after a brief pause, "I'd like strawberry, please." Chapter 102, The Ice Cream Treat. "Should I exchange some money?" John pondered, looking at the few pounds in his hand. It seemed almost comical that he, Tang Johnny Yinsho, nearly found himself short of cash. It was July when John returned to Privet Drive, stopping by the Dursleys' residence. Upon seeing John, Vernon Dursley was rendered speechless, while Dudley, stricken with fear, quickly sought refuge. John, feigning ignorance of their discomfort, presented Vernon with a large watermelon he had purchased. "Is Harry upstairs? Sorry to disturb you," John inquired politely. Given John's courteous demeanor, Vernon had no choice but to grudgingly respond, "Yes, he's up there," while eyeing John warily, contemplating when he might rid himself of John's presence. Since John's last warning, the Dursleys had eased their harsh treatment of Harry. Though they occasionally uttered a few harsh words, they dared not confine him as before. Ascending the stairs, John heard murmurs from within. Harry was engrossed in a history of magic essay when John knocked and entered. Harry, surprised by John's visit, had sought him earlier, only to find John in Nocturne Alley at the time. "Harry, would you like some ice cream?" John offered, producing a boxed ice cream from his bag. Harry, taken aback, accepted it, puzzled. "Did you come just to bring me ice cream?" "Of course not," John replied with a smirk, dismissing the notion of being so superficial. With a casual wave of his hand, he closed the door, a gesture that left Harry in awe. Despite knowing the gap in their magical abilities, Harry hadn't realized it was so vast. He was still mastering spellcasting with a wand, while John could effortlessly cast spells without one. John then retrieved 2 gloves from his bag and donned them. "What are you planning to do?" Harry inquired, noting John's prepared stance. "You mentioned your wound was bothering you last time. I want to examine it," John explained. Unbeknownst to others, John was acutely aware of the significance of Harry's scar. As the 7th Horcrux, Harry harbored a fragment of Voldemort's soul. John had encountered extensive literature on the soul in both the Slytherin and Gryffindor chambers of secrets. The soul, a complex entity, had been a subject of diverse research among wizards. Although now taboo, soul studies were not uncommon in the past. Equipped with anti-curse gloves, John gently probed Harry's scar, a scene that Harry found somewhat amusing, yet rendered him helpless. John's enthusiasm seemed excessive to Harry, who had only mentioned his discomfort in passing. As Harry savored his ice cream, John meticulously examined the scar, confirming the presence of a potent spell, more akin to a curse. Could it be because of love? John pondered. The spell of love that protected Harry was a marvel, impervious even to Voldemort. It shielded Harry, causing Quirrell to burn upon contact. "John, are you okay?" Harry asked, noticing John's deep contemplation and fearing to move as his ice cream nearly melted. "If you cut it." John mused aloud, startling Harry into a cold sweat. "Calm down, John. I'm not a lab rat." "Okay," John conceded, albeit somewhat disappointed. Understanding the structure of the Horcrux could potentially offer a means to counter Voldemort. "If you're in pain again, just let me know," he offered, concerned about Harry's well-being. Harry nodded eagerly, relieved that John had abandoned any drastic measures. Upon returning home, John set about crafting new weapons, acquiring a plethora of equipment for the task. He melted silver sickles mixed with mithril, crafting a sword of sterling silver that floated in the air, a testament to his skill and determination to protect those he cared about. In the basement, John was engrossed in his work, manipulating silver liquid and blending it with various metals. After some time, the blade, now cooled, was polished meticulously by John. He then took out dragon's blood to engrave intricate patterns onto the blade. The sword of Iron Wick was previously coated by snake venom. "After refining it, I've managed to infuse the blade with the venom," John explained. He had disassembled Ironwick's sword and incorporated these materials into it, significantly increasing the blade's weight. Casting a spell to re-engrave the sword, he watched as flames engulfed it. Despite the high temperature, the silver sword remained intact, a testament to John's successful enhancement. "It may not rival the sword of Gryffindor, but it's a magical item in its own right," he mused. After inspecting his work, John left some space on the sword for future spell additions, effectively upgrading Ironwick's sword in every aspect. "I'll name you Silver Wick," he declared, satisfied with his creation, and placed the sword into a small bag. This bag, a masterpiece from a master alchemist, featured a stable, traceless stretching spell and offered ample space. That night, John donned a silver mask and a green robe. With a flick of his wand, he disappeared, reappearing in Nocturne Alley through apparition, which greatly facilitated his movements. Tang Mi was already there, accompanied by a stooped old man. Upon John's arrival, the old man, trembling with excitement, seemed on the verge of kneeling. John's gaze shifted to Tang Mi for an explanation. "My lord, this is old Jack from the werewolf community. He's come seeking your help," Tang Mi introduced. John recalled Fenrir, the former leader of the werewolf community, whom he had dealt with previously. "State your request," John commanded in a deep voice. With a raspy voice, old Jack said, "Respected Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand, we seek your protection. After Fenrir's downfall, the werewolves scattered, leaving behind the old, weak, and sick among us." John learned that following his confrontation with Fenrir, the werewolf community had disintegrated, leaving its most vulnerable members at the mercy of a dark wizard intent on their destruction. In desperation, they turned to John, the very person responsible for their plight. After confirming the truth of old Jack's words with Tang Mi, John responded, "I will grant your request for help. In return, you must ensure the werewolf community is well managed." Recognizing the potential in guiding the young werewolves properly, John saw an opportunity to harness a powerful force for the future. Overjoyed, old Jack expressed his gratitude, hoping for Merlin's blessing upon John. Days later, the werewolf community witnessed the demise of the dark wizard threatening them, marked by the emblem of Johnny Silverhand. This act, along with John's provision of wolfsbane potion to the young werewolves, alleviated their suffering during the full moon and solidified Johnny Silverhand's reputation as a protector. Even the Daily Prophet sought an exclusive interview with him, with Rita Skeeter as the reporter. John, wary of her penchant for sensationalism, warned her against any misleading rhetoric. The resulting article, titled "Johnny Silverhand, the Great Good Man," showcased a different side of John, further enhancing his standing in the wizarding world. In a recent publication, the newspaper featured an article highlighting Johnny Silverhand's aspiration for global harmony and his desire to see an end to the suffering of young wizards due to hunger. It was rumored that Rita Skeeter even proposed to the editor-in-chief that Johnny Silverhand be honored with the annual Great Benefactor Award. However, the suggestion was ultimately declined by the editor-in-chief. Chapter 103, Level 4 Runes and Ancient Magic. The owl thudded against the window, a clear indication of its arrival. Recognizing it as the old Weasley family owl, without a moment's hesitation, John swiftly opened the window and gently lifted the bird, retrieving the letter from its beak. "Traveling to Egypt?" he murmured, scanning the letter. Ron had written to inform John that their family was planning a trip to Egypt, expressing regret that the invitation to the burrow would have to be postponed. "I would have completely forgotten about it if he hadn't mentioned it." Ron had extended an invitation to John during their second year, but amidst the chaos of returning home and his experiments with Banban, John had let it slip his mind, assuming Ron wouldn't extend the offer again. Percy's letter followed, filled with gratitude towards John for aiding in his election as student council president. He also hinted at his aspirations to work in the Ministry of Magic in the future. "It seems he set his sights on the Ministry of Magic. I remember him doing quite well there," John reflected. Percy, an outlier in the Weasley family, had always been ambitious, methodically climbing the ranks from prefect to head boy, and now aiming for a position in the ministry. With a smile, John thought, "In that case, I'm more than happy to assist." He penned a letter to Barty Crouch Sr., a man he had come to respect deeply for his uncompromising principles, even when it came to dealing with his own kin. John believed Percy would benefit greatly from working under someone like Crouch. After sorting through his daily correspondence, John picked up the latest issue of the Daily Prophet. The controversy surrounding Johnny Silverhand had begun to settle, and the opening of a museum dedicated to dark magic awareness suggested Silverhand wasn't the typical power-hungry dark wizard. Today's front page featured Gilderoy Lockhart, who had been awarded the title of Most Charming Smile by Wizards Weekly for the 6th consecutive year. The paper also covered the success of Lockhart's latest book, I Swing the Great Sword at Hogwarts, which had quickly become a bestseller in the wizarding world. John had to admit, Lockhart possessed a unique talent. As long as his true nature remained hidden, he was indeed the magic world's leading figure. The book's innovative approach, featuring two protagonists, a dashing, powerful professor and a gifted Hogwarts student, along with its loosely factual content, had captivated readers. "It's a masterpiece in its own right," John conceded, considering the potential of further collaborations with Lockhart. Seeing an opportunity, John drafted a letter to Rita Skeeter, confident that with the backing of the Daily Prophet, Lockhart's success could be sustained. Behind the scenes, John planned to fuel the fire, not without personal gain, of course. He intended to secure the copyright for Silverhand Johnny, with profits to be split between himself and Lockhart. Properly managed, this venture could prove quite lucrative for John. Descending to the basement, which had become his personal domain, filled with dangerous artifacts securely locked away, John reflected on his day's achievements. His mastery of runes had advanced to level 4, allowing him to fully comprehend the contents of Fairy Foundry. The goblin's unique magical forging techniques, detailed within the pages, were nothing short of miraculous. Fairy magic, John mused, intrigued by the ancient and powerful goblin magic laid out before him. John was deep in contemplation. The magic he was studying was known as ancient magic, a form of magic that predated even the era of the Hogwarts founders, back to a time when goblins were not yet governed by wizards. Unlike the wand-based magic commonly practiced by wizards, leprechaun magic, another form of ancient magic, was innate and did not rely on wands. It's no surprise that ancient runes are considered a part of ancient magic, given their necessity, John mused, after delving into the knowledge contained within the ancient tome. Intent on mastering this arcane art, John attempted to replicate the goblin method of casting. To harness the elements and channel them into objects, creating a natural magic circuit, he whispered to himself. With a magic crystal in hand and his arms extended forward, he focused his mind. Suddenly, a whirlwind materialized in the confines of the basement, seemingly out of nowhere. The element of wind, he observed, his gaze fixed on the swirling vortex. Maintaining his concentration, John manipulated the whirlwind, guiding it towards a ring of spells etched on the table. As the wind made contact, the spell was activated, narrowly missing John's cheek with a petrification curse. The wind dissipated immediately after. It appears further experimentation is necessary, John concluded, his brow furrowed in thought. The complexity of the Fairy Foundry and its reliance on ancient magic was daunting. John pondered whether seeking a goblin's craftsmanship, much like Godric Gryffindor once did, would be simpler. However, he quickly realized the futility of this idea, considering the current state of goblin affairs and their concentration in Gringotts. The craftsmanship of the Goblin King who forged Gryffindor's sword is beyond the skill of ordinary goblins, he acknowledged with a sigh. Resigned, he muttered, I must rely on my own abilities. Glancing at the skill panel, John noticed he had 2 unused points and a new skill labeled Proficient in Ancient Magic. Although it was only at level 1 and could not be upgraded further at the moment, it signified a need for deeper knowledge in ancient magic. To advance further, I must delve deeper into the study of ancient magic, he realized, acknowledging his limited understanding of the subject. Setting aside his immediate concerns, John dedicated himself to comprehensively studying the Fairy Foundry. His expertise in alchemy and runes made the book's content accessible, though he found its coverage of goblin casting techniques lacking. I may need to explore other sources, he thought, considering the restricted section of the library and the secret chambers of the ancient wizards as potential reservoirs of knowledge. In the days that followed, John remained secluded in his basement, mastering the elemental magics of fog, water, and fire, in addition to wind. Each element offered unique advantages. Wind enhanced perception, fog concealed his presence, water manipulated flows, and fire conjured flames. The ability to wield these magics without a wand was a significant achievement for John. Tom, do a backflip, John commanded, watching his dog perform the trick with ease. Remarkable. How did you manage to train him? A visitor, a business associate of John's guardian, inquired, clearly impressed. It's nothing special, just the basics, John replied modestly. The visitor had brought along his child, hoping to foster a friendship between the 2 boys. However, John found the child's arrogance unbearable, preferring the company of his dog, Tom, to feigning interest in childish conversations. Seeking solace, John excused himself, craving the fresh air outside. Ah, the sweet taste of freedom, John sighed, relieved to be away from the stifling atmosphere. He vowed to avoid such tedious social obligations in the future, finding them more taxing than his most challenging negotiations. Even Draco Malfoy seems more tolerable in comparison, he mused, reflecting on the nature of spoiled children. and his desire to steer clear of them. With no particular destination in mind, John wandered aimlessly, enjoying the peace and solitude of his impromptu escape. On the side of the road, John stumbled upon a black dog. The dog appeared to have been starving for days. Even beneath its thick fur, John could discern the dog's emaciated frame. He acknowledged that the dog wasn't particularly attractive, but as someone who couldn't resist the allure of furry creatures, John couldn't help but offer a pack of small dried fish. "Have you been hungry for a long time?" he asked. The black dog, which had been staring off into the distance, seemed momentarily taken aback by the sound of John's voice. A dark-haired boy was offering him small dried fish, an unusual choice for a canine diet. However, driven by hunger, the dog didn't hesitate to accept the offering. Watching the dog devour the fish, John felt a pang of sympathy. Gently patting the dog's head, John mused aloud, "I wonder where you came from. Stray dogs aren't common around here." Despite its unkempt appearance, the dog's coat was surprisingly soft and well-maintained. John found himself enjoying the sensation of petting the dog, so much so that he failed to notice the dog's bewildered gaze. This encounter marked the beginning of an unusual friendship, one that would soon reveal the black dog's extraordinary origins. Unbeknownst to John, this was no ordinary stray, but a creature steeped in magic and mystery. Chapter 104, Stardust and the Godfather. After the house guests finally departed, Tom, the family dog, was visibly exhausted, his fur slightly ruffled from the day's events. A young visitor had been particularly rough with Tom, attempting to take him away despite his parents' offers to compensate for any trouble caused. Mrs. Wick, however, managed to scare the child off with a deceptively kind smile, all the while brandishing a table knife with an ease that would make even Watson hesitate. Upon John's return, Tom's spirits instantly lifted, though confusion flickered in his eyes as he approached. Abruptly stopping, Tom sniffed around John, his demeanor suggesting betrayal. It was as if Tom could detect the scent of another dog on John. Despite Tom's apparent jealousy, John reassured him with a laugh. "It was nothing serious, just a bit of fun. I promise I won't bring another dog home." Tom's wagging tail soon betrayed his lingering doubts, quickly placated by a generous serving of dog food. Meanwhile, a snowy owl perched atop a cabinet caught John's attention with its hungry calls. "Where have you been hiding?" John mused, offering the owl some dried fish. As he turned to the attic room, he was greeted by the sight of another snowy owl, identical to the first. "You're Basil. Then who is this?" John pondered, holding the newcomer. The two owls, upon closer inspection, began to show signs of rivalry, leading to a brief scuffle that John diffused with more dried fish. Outside, John noticed the large black dog still loitering near the road, pondering if it had an owner. His attention was soon diverted back to the owls, now identified as Basil and Hedwig, Harry Potter's own pet. The revelation came just as Harry appeared, searching for Hedwig. John called out to him, and a relieved Harry rushed over, greeted warmly by Mrs. Wick's elegant presence. Inside, Watson Wick, reminiscing about his days as a driver in Canary Wharf, made an unusual request to Harry. He asked, in hushed tones, if Harry could turn a teacup into a mouse, promising to keep it a secret. Harry, taken aback by the request and the implication of his abilities, politely declined, citing the prohibition of underage magic outside school. Watson's surprise at this rule hinted at his own son's magical experiments at home. The Wick's attic, where John resided, was a stark contrast to Harry's cupboard at the Dursleys. Spacious and filled with kennels and bird cages, it resembled a small zoo, a testament to the Wick's love for animals and the magical world intertwined with their own. To ensure John didn't stand out too much among them, Hedwig was given a piece of dried fish, for which Harry expressed his gratitude repeatedly. John noticed the absence of the large black dog that had been outside, presuming it had left. Seizing the moment, John mentioned, "Since you're here, I have your birthday present ready." He gestured towards a wrapped gift box on the table and handed it to Harry. Harry, taken aback by the gesture, eagerly asked, "May I open it?" "Of course it's yours," John replied, feeding Hedwig another small piece of dried fish, noting the owl must have been famished after its long flight. Curiously, Harry unwrapped the gift to find a bottle filled with a black powdery substance. As he shook it, The powder inside fluttered like a constellation of stars in motion, a sight he had never witnessed before. "What is this?" he inquired, fascinated. "It's an anti-eavesdropping powder. Sprinkle it around, and it will alert you to any snooping," John explained. Demonstrating its use, he took a pinch of the powder and tossed it into the air, where it drifted and adhered to the door. At that moment, John called out, "Dad, were you planning to bring us some drinks?" Watson, caught eavesdropping behind the door, entered sheepishly with drinks, before quickly excusing himself. John, with a shrug, remarked, "See? Just like that." Harry's eyes sparkled with excitement as he held the bottle, already thinking of the relief of not having to worry about Uncle Vernon or hearing him anymore. "What's it called?" he asked. John, realizing he hadn't named the powder yet, replied offhandedly, "Let's call it Stardust." In August, John ventured to Diagon Alley, adopting a low profile as Johnny Silverhand, a name that had become synonymous with mystery. He visited a divination shop and purchased a crystal ball filled with swirling white mist. Despite several attempts, John couldn't trigger any prophecies, leading him to conclude, divination is not as straightforward as it seems. He whimsically used the crystal ball as a paperweight in his office. When Lucius Malfoy and his son Draco visited, John was taken aback by their unexpected arrival. Draco, visibly tense, seemed inexperienced in dealing with the enigmatic Johnny Silverhand. Lucius, however, approached with a congenial smile, expressing his pleasure at reuniting after some time. He introduced his son, Draco, who respectfully greeted John as "Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand." John was puzzled by their visit until Lucius revealed his intention, smiling warmly. "I would be honored if my son could become the godson of Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand." John was astounded by the request. If he weren't wearing a mask, his surprise would have been evident. The idea of becoming Draco's godfather was bewildering to him, especially considering they were classmates. The thought of navigating their future interactions under such a peculiar dynamic was perplexing. Yet, John also grasped Lucius's underlying motive. By proposing this relationship, Lucius sought to align his family more closely with Johnny Silverhand's influential reputation, hoping to leverage it for their benefit. To further solidify the bond between their families, Lucius Malfoy sought a deeper connection than mere friendship with John. He believed that having John as a godfather to his son would bring the families closer, offering a more intimate and reassuring relationship to the Malfoys. However, John's response was not what Lucius had anticipated. "I understand your intentions, Lucius," John began, his voice carrying a weight of seriousness. "But there's something fundamentally wrong with this proposal." Lucius was taken aback by John's refusal. He had not expected resistance, especially considering the importance he had placed on this alliance for the future of the Malfoy family. Draco, who had been informed by his father of John's significance, felt a wave of disappointment. "Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand, Draco is a commendable young man," Lucius attempted to persuade. "I know Lucius, perhaps even better than you do," John countered, his statement leaving Lucius puzzled. How could Johnny Silverhand claim to know Draco better? Even Draco himself was momentarily confused by the claim. However, John clarified his point, adding a layer of insight that Lucius had not considered. "In Draco's eyes, I see a genuine desire for self-improvement. Lucius, you're overlooking a rare quality in your son, akin to a pearl hidden in the dust." Lucius was prompted to reassess his perception of his son. The notion of Draco possessing such a quality, the drive for self-improvement, was something he hadn't fully appreciated. John's words not only challenged Lucius's understanding of his son, but also highlighted a valuable trait that Lucius had failed to nurture. Chapter 105. The Black Dog and Tom Lucius Malfoy scrutinized the scene before him, yet he failed to perceive what John had suggested. Unperturbed, John continued, "He will become a formidable wizard, independent of his lineage. His own merits will be his legacy, one that will fill you with pride." John's words were generous, for compliments cost nothing to give. His voice, low and raspy, carried the weight of ancient tales, reminiscent of a troubadour from bygone eras. He is destined to chase after someone, a person who will alter the course of everything. Like a beacon in the night sky, he will illuminate the entire magical world. Draco Malfoy felt a stir within him at these words. the image of John vivid in his mind. John's gaze, penetrating and insightful, seemed to pierce through Draco's soul as he posed a significant question. Son, will you choose to follow this individual, or will you live your life shielded by others? Caught in a tumult of emotions, Draco finally declared with conviction, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnny Silverhand, but I already have someone I've chosen to follow. He may not possess your strength, but he is worthy of my loyalty. Lucius, taken aback by his son's words, feared a misunderstanding. However, John raised a hand to forestall any response from Lucius. Approaching Draco, John spoke with an air of mystery. I look forward to seeing this unfold. The intensity of the moment compelled Draco to take a deep breath, to which he solemnly nodded. That day will come. John, satisfied with Draco's resolve, decided there was no need to pursue the matter of godfatherhood further. To divert Lucius from any dark thoughts, John presented several letters. These are invitations from pureblood families to Hogwarts. You will reclaim your position on the Hogwarts Board of Governors before Christmas this year. Lucius's spirits lifted at the prospect of regaining his former status. However, John added a stipulation. You must refrain from meddling excessively in Hogwarts affairs. This position is merely a title. Lucius's expectations were dashed, his face clouding over. John's gaze, deep and commanding, met Lucius's. You must learn contentment. Remember, the person you've antagonized is hailed as the most powerful headmaster in Hogwarts history. John's admonition struck a chord with Lucius, reminding him of Dumbledore's formidable reputation, a man who had contended with dark lords across generations. Lucius, conceding internally, recognized the necessity for the Malfoys to adopt a more subdued approach. After Lucius and Draco departed, John remained in contemplation. Lucius seems unaware of Voldemort's current predicament, he mused. Given Voldemort's weakened state, it was unlikely he could rally his followers as he once did. This ignorance was advantageous to John, who admitted to having gaps in his memory regarding certain events. Regardless, we'll face whatever comes. Harry and Dumbledore will handle what lies ahead, John resolved, pushing these concerns aside. Casting a disillusionment charm on himself, John departed Johnny Silverhands. Reaching a secluded spot, he used apparition to return home, his skill in the magical art improving with each journey. Upon arriving, John noticed Tom's absence. Basil, where's Tom? He inquired. Basil, dozing in his designated spot, opened one eye lazily and glanced towards the window. Approaching, John observed his own dog, Basil, alongside a large black stray dog they had encountered previously. I was envious last time, but today we played together, Basil seemed to convey through his relaxed demeanor. This chapter not only advances the plot, but also deepens the character development, particularly of Draco Malfoy, showcasing his loyalty and the choices that define him. John's mysterious aura and his interactions with the Malfoys hint at larger forces at play, setting the stage for future events in this magical world. John watched with a mix of amusement and concern as his small dog, Tom, struggled to keep up with the long strides of the large, black dog that had recently started visiting. The size difference between the two was comical, yet somehow they had formed a close bond. John mused, could it be because they're both male? He glanced at the black dog, noting its size, especially its long legs, and then back at Tom, remembering that Tom was female. Well, Tom, a relationship between you two seems unlikely, especially considering the size difference, he thought, somewhat disheartened by the thought of his dog's unrequited affection. John couldn't help but wonder if this was a peculiar case of love, where a handsome, long-legged stray dog had captured the heart of his pampered pet. Let them enjoy their time together, he decided, knowing that soon he would be off to school and Tom would likely forget her distant admirer. With a shake of his head, he turned his attention away from the canine companions. Meanwhile, Sirius Black, in his animagus form of a large black dog, was hiding in Privet Drive, evading the Ministry of Magic and the Dementors. He was consumed with thoughts of revenge against Peter Pettigrew, the friend who had betrayed him and their other friends, leading to Sirius's wrongful imprisonment in Azkaban. The sight of Tom, the small dog, brought back memories of simpler times, including the taste of small dried fish, a luxury compared to the scraps he had survived on since escaping Azkaban. Seeing Sirius drool at the memory, Tom quickly fetched a large bag of dog food, which, while not as delightful as dried fish, was a feast for Sirius. He devoured the food, finding pieces of jerky and steak among the kibble, a meal that nearly brought him to tears after years of hardship. John, observing the scene, couldn't help but draw parallels between his dog feeding Sirius and the stories of wealthy families secretly supporting their less fortunate relatives. "I never expected you to be such a generous dog," he remarked, half-jokingly considering whether he should take measures to prevent Sirius from potentially causing trouble for other pets in the neighborhood. Deciding to let the matter rest for now, John focused on his own responsibilities, including dealing with the Monster Book of Monsters, a textbook chosen by Hagrid for his upcoming class on the conservation of magical zoology. As he calmed the book by stroking its spine, John reflected on Hagrid's vindication. After decades of being blamed for an incident caused by Voldemort, Hagrid's name had finally been cleared, allowing him to take up a teaching position at Hogwarts. John pondered the concept of justice, realizing that while it may eventually prevail, the time lost could never be reclaimed. Justice may be late, but is it truly justice if it arrives after so much time has passed? He thought, considering the years Hagrid had suffered due to a wrongful accusation. Despite everything, Hagrid's enthusiasm for teaching and his love for magical creatures remained undiminished, a testament to his resilient spirit. For 50 years, he had dedicated himself to the care of his beloved magical creatures. It was likely that Dumbledore was aware of this passion, which is why he decided to offer Hagrid compensation. Hagrid, who had never before held the title of professor, immediately thought of John. Given John's role as an assistant in the Defense Against the Dark Arts, Hagrid believed him to be highly experienced. However, upon reviewing the curriculum Hagrid had planned, John couldn't help but shake his head in disbelief. Forget about the blast-ended scroots and the like. Why can't we include some more appealing creatures? John lamented, feeling a twinge of discomfort. Hagrid, with his boundless affection for all magical creatures, failed to see them through the eyes of the students. To him, every creature was enchanting and beautiful, but John knew better. Creatures like the blast-ended scroots were far from endearing to most students. Thus, John found himself revising Hagrid's list, striving to include magical animals that would captivate and educate the students without causing undue distress. After meticulously reworking the curriculum, John looked up, exhausted from the effort. To his surprise, he saw a massive balloon floating across the sky. The sight was unexpected and out of place, yet it captured his attention, pulling him momentarily away from the world of magical creatures and into the wonders of the sky above. Chapter 1-6, A Balloon in the Sky and the Dursleys' Fear. A worthless, lazy liar, a complete good-for-nothing. Aunt Marge's words were like venom. He is not. Harry's voice trembled with rage, defending his father against her slander. Have some more brandy. Uncle Vernon, sensing the escalating tension, hastily refilled Aunt Marge's glass with the remainder of the bottle. He then turned to Harry with a growl. Go to bed now. No, Vernon. Aunt Marge, having downed her brandy with a belch, fixed her small, bloodshot eyes on Harry, her gaze seeming to taunt him. Go on, boy. You're very proud of your parents, aren't you? They were killed in a car crash. Unable to bear the lies any longer, Harry stood, his voice firm. They didn't die in a car accident. His words caused Uncle Vernon's face to blanch, and he gestured frantically for Marge to cease her provocations. However, Aunt Marge seemed unable to stop herself, her words growing more vitriolic, labeling Harry a burden and an ungrateful wretch. As she spoke, her body began to swell unnaturally, expanding like a balloon until she floated upwards. Uncle Vernon's scream of horror echoed as he attempted, in vain, to pull her down, nearly being lifted off the ground himself. The Dursleys were thrown into chaos, but Harry had no desire to stay. Grabbing his luggage, he made for the door in seconds. Uncle Vernon tried to intercept him, but Harry, wand in hand, warned, She's doing this to herself. Move. After Harry had stormed out, dragging his suitcase through the streets, his anger began to ebb, replaced by exhaustion and confusion. Leaning against a wall on Magnolia Crescent, he gasped for breath, overwhelmed by his predicament. Using magic outside of school could have severe consequences, possibly even Azkaban. Lost in his turmoil, he wondered if he would be forced to navigate the Muggle world alone, a fugitive. His thoughts turned to Ron and Hermione, his steadfast friends who would surely stand by him, regardless of the circumstances. Yet, with Hedwig temporarily staying with Ron, Harry felt utterly isolated. "Harry, there seems to be a lot of activity over there," a familiar voice broke through his despair. John emerged from the shadows, inexplicably holding a can of dried fish. "Planning to run away from home?" he inquired, raising an eyebrow at Harry's disheveled state. "John, I might be wandering the world soon," Harry admitted, feeling a glimmer of hope upon seeing John, who lived nearby and had likely witnessed his good deed. John couldn't help but chuckle. "Harry, you're the savior. Do you really think the Ministry of Magic would imprison you over something so trivial? Come on, you need to calm down." He set down the dried fish, offering a bit of comfort. "Don't worry too much. Just find a safe place to wait. The Ministry might just send you a letter." Suggesting that Harry could stay at the leaky cauldron for a while, John offered to help sort things out. Harry, feeling somewhat reassured, nodded in agreement. John then handed Harry a bag of galleons, noticing his stunned expression. "Didn't you ask to borrow some money?" That's a lot. At least 100 galleons," Harry murmured, overwhelmed by John's generosity and the unexpected turn of events. Harry scratched his head and stammered, clearly uncomfortable. John, with a hint of amusement, quipped, "With a veritable mountain of gold in your vault, are you really playing the pauper here?" He tossed a galleon to Harry, which struck him in the chest, causing him to wince. Without another word, John turned and made his way to the Dursleys' house, mindful of the need to conclude his business swiftly before any Muggles noticed the spectacle unfolding in the sky. It was only after John had departed that Harry managed to catch his breath, the weight of the gold coin in his hand a tangible reminder of the encounter. Watching John's retreating figure, Harry felt an unexpected warmth in his heart. However, this feeling was quickly replaced by a shiver of apprehension as he sensed something ominous lurking in the shadows at the end of the street. Instinctively, he whispered, "Lumos," and his wand cast a reassuring glow. Across the road, he spotted a large black dog, its size and demeanor reminiscent of a bear, which made Harry's heart race. In his attempt to get a better look, he stumbled and fell. Suddenly, the sound of galloping pierced the night, followed by a blinding light. Shielding his eyes, Harry glimpsed a purple, three-decker bus materializing before him. The conductor, a young man with notably large ears, hopped down and eyed Harry with suspicion. "What are you doing on the ground?" he inquired. Harry glanced back across the street, only to find that the black dog had vanished. Meanwhile, chaos reigned at the Dursleys' house. Amidst the cacophony of screams and barking dogs, Maggie was seen floating perilously in the air until a snowy owl swooped in, skillfully grabbing her by the collar and bringing her safely to the ground. John approached the house and knocked, but the tumult inside suggested that no one would answer. Effortlessly, he waved his hand over the doorknob, which clicked open, allowing him entrance. The moment he stepped inside, the noise ceased as if muted. Vernon Dursley, red-faced and furious, began to berate John, but a single look from John silenced him. Maggie, still in a daze, was brought inside by Basil. The Dursleys, desperate, pleaded with John, "Please, can you undo whatever has been done to her?" John, with a slight smirk, responded, "If you've learned anything from your Muggle upbringing, it's that politeness goes a long way." Vernon, struggling to contain his anger, managed to choke out a request for help. With a nonchalant gesture from John, Maggie's condition was swiftly reversed, leaving her disoriented but physically unharmed. Just then, a loud noise announced the arrival of 2 Ministry of Magic officials. They were initially taken aback by the scene, but quickly focused on Maggie, who was still recovering from her ordeal. John, ever the charmer, addressed the officials. "I believe there's a Muggle here in need of your services to erase a rather distressing memory." He then casually suggested they reward his owl, Basil, with a couple of dried fish for its assistance, leaving the officials bemused by his audacity. Despite their confusion, the officials proceeded to erase Maggie's memory, much to the Dursleys' horror, who feared the worst. Once the ministry representatives had departed, John remained, a calm presence amidst the storm he had helped quell. Perched on the sofa, Basil gracefully flew to his shoulder and settled there. He turned to Vernon Dursley with a smile that belied his youthful appearance, making him seem as formidable as the wealthiest and most influential figures. "Now, Mr. Dursley, could you perhaps enlighten me as to why Harry is so upset?" he inquired, his tone polite, yet carrying an undercurrent of authority that made Vernon swallow hard. Despite being evidently the same age as Harry, Basil exuded an aura that commanded respect and attention, much like those in positions of power. Chapter 107, Silverhand's Angel Investment and the Call of Magic. As the head of the family, Vernon Dursley stood up, his voice cautious. "It's about Maggie. We inadvertently mentioned something concerning Harry's parents." Inadvertently? John's gaze was piercing, prompting Vernon to quickly amend his statement. Perhaps some unfortunate words were mixed in. Observing John's expression for signs of anger and finding none, Vernon was relieved. John sighed, understanding now why Harry had been so upset. In Harry's eyes, his parents were paragons of virtue. It was during today's heated moment that Harry, agitated, had unintentionally unleashed magic on Maggie. Remarkably, he had done so without a wand, which reinforced John's belief that magic was closely tied to emotions. Sitting on the sofa, John tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the armrest. The Dursleys watched in terror as the chaos they had caused seemed to be tidied away by unseen forces. John fixed Vernon with a meaningful look and said calmly, "It appears you have a fundamental misunderstanding of wizards." Vernon, intimidated by John's penetrating gaze, remained silent. "You seem to think wizards are akin to street magicians, mere tricksters," John continued, his voice cool. "You're mistaken. A wizard could effortlessly demolish a house with a flick of his wand or send your car careening off a cliff." Vernon gasped, his voice trembling. "But students aren't allowed to use magic outside of school, right?" John's response was a chuckle. "True, but that's not the whole story. Do you think someone ceases to be a wizard once they leave Hogwarts? Let me be clear, Mr. Dursley, I'm not trying to scare you unnecessarily. By antagonizing Harry, you're pushing him towards a dangerous path." Vernon felt a chill run down his spine. He had underestimated Harry's capabilities and the gravity of their situation. Today, had Harry been less in control, you might not have been here to see my arrival. Life is fragile. Why provoke a wizard, especially with such disdain? You could have been a supportive family. Petunia Dursley, upon hearing the word family, clutched Vernon's hand. Harry was her nephew, her sister's child. The loss of Harry's parents to Voldemort was also the loss of her sister. Despite her envy of her sister's magical abilities, Petunia had never intended to abandon Harry. John's words made her realize the gravity of her actions towards Harry. Vernon, drenched in cold sweat, recalled the fear he felt when Harry had pointed his wand at him earlier that day. "That will be all, Mr. Dursley. What a disruption this has been," John concluded, standing to leave now that the Dursleys understood the need to change their attitude towards Harry. On his way home, John encountered the large black dog again. "Here again, after just feeding you dried fish?" he muttered, placing the last piece of dried fish on the ground before the dog. After giving the dog a pat on the head, John continued on his way home. Sirius, in his animagus form, recognized John as Harry's ally. As he chewed on the dried fish, he pondered how to capture the traitor. With less than a month of summer vacation remaining, John gave a crystal ball a gentle push. It rolled off the table onto the floor. Tom, eager to help, rushed to retrieve it. "It seems the enthusiasm of our young wizard knows no bounds," John mused, eyeing a stack of letters on the table addressed to the generous Lord Johnny Silverhand. Having already committed to covering the expenses for a cursed young wizard's wolfsbane potion until he came of age, John noted that more than half of the Little Wizard Foundation's funds were still available. With a considerable sum amassed from the profits of Lockhart's books and the continuous revenue from the Johnny Silverhand store, John decided it was time to put the surplus to good use. Johnny Silverhand, leveraging his wealth, established a unique opportunity to support the entrepreneurial dreams of young wizards. By offering angel investment, he addressed the common issue of lacking startup capital among aspiring wizard entrepreneurs. His stores across the country received a steady stream of letters, prompting Johnny to designate a special mailbox for these correspondences. Among the letters, one from Fred and George Weasley caught his attention. Known for their inventive minds, the twins proposed opening a joke store. Johnny, intrigued, replied with interest but insisted on evaluating their products first, despite their shared classmate status. Before sending his response, Johnny remembered the Weasley twins were currently in Egypt. Deciding to wait for their return, he set the letter aside and sifted through the others. A photo from Hermione in Paris caught his eye, though the darkness of the image made him question the camera angle. Another letter from Dharma Alex revealed his keen interest in Johnny's last research proposal. Eager to share his findings, Dharma invited Johnny to Belby Manor. Upon arrival, Johnny was greeted by a house elf and introduced to a visibly exhausted Dharma, whose dedication to his work was evident from his smoke-emitting ears and dark circles under his eyes. Dharma's excitement was palpable as he showed Johnny his breakthrough on the blood curse, a millennia-old affliction. He had developed a potion, similar in preparation to the Wolfsbane potion, due to the lack of specific test subject. Johnny, examining the potion, noted its foul stench and the ominous scarlet color. He expressed more interest in the hereditary aspect of the curse, pointing out the unique challenge it presented compared to other forms of magic. As Dharma's exhaustion finally overtook him, leading him to fall asleep mid-conversation, Johnny contemplated finding a place to wait. Suddenly, his surroundings transformed into a dense forest, and a mysterious voice beckoned him. A figure flashed before his eyes, and Johnny felt as though he was being pulled into an apparition passage. Amidst the disorienting experience, he glimpsed lines of silver light, hinting at an unforeseen adventure ahead. This unexpected turn of events promised to delve deeper into the mysteries of magic and the unexplored territories that lay beyond the familiar walls of the wizarding world. Johnny's journey was about to take a new, thrilling direction, guided by the mysterious call of the unknown. Hovering before him, John grasped the ethereal line with all his might, only to find himself plummeting suddenly. The visions that had enveloped him vanished, replaced by the familiar surroundings of Belby Manor. Leaning heavily against the table, John gasped for air, his gaze fixated on his right hand. A silver, light-like line extended from his palm, disappearing into the void at its other end. "Who was that just now?" John murmured, perplexed. It felt as though he had physically touched something moments before. Glancing down, he discovered a book in his hand. Upon closer inspection, he realized that the open page detailed a blood curse. Simultaneously, he noticed an enhancement in his proficiency with ancient magic. As John contemplated his newfound mastery, the voice he had heard earlier lingered in his mind. It bore a resemblance to the enchantments used by goblins, yet there was something uniquely compelling about it. Could it be ancient magic? He pondered, his fingers gently caressing the page that spoke of the blood curse. The look in John's eyes shifted, reflecting a newfound determination. The call he had experienced was undoubtedly from the realm of ancient magic, carrying with it a sorrowful, feminine timbre. This warrants investigation, John resolved, his grip on the ethereal line firming. However, he realized that the source of the call lay beyond the nation's borders, in a place shrouded in mystery. Chapter 108, Albania and the Source of the Call. After the silver light line left the palm of his hand, it retracted in one direction. John grasped it firmly again, but the line remained stationary in his palm, exerting a faint pulling force. "It's guiding me," John mused. Without further delay, he left Belby Manor and used apparition. At the moment of apparition, John felt the strength of the line in his hand intensify. He undertook an extremely dangerous action by allowing the line to pull him instead of apparating by his own will. This sensation was extraordinary. John's body was continuously compressed and elongated. Gradually, he found himself being drawn into the lines, shuttling at high speed while enduring the pain of this acceleration. Suddenly, there was an explosion, and John, radiating silver light, fell to the ground. The silver light line in his hand gradually dissipated as he surveyed his surroundings. "I am certain that I have entered a country illegally," he thought, observing the wild and untamed environment that confirmed his suspicion of being in a remote location. The dense virgin forest enveloped him. Using apparition for the first time for long-distance teleportation, John was overwhelmed by a wave of nausea and retched a few times. After regaining his composure, John's attention was drawn to a distinctive three-pronged tree, similar to one he had seen in his vision. He approached it cautiously, his pupils dilating as he noticed grains of chaotic elemental fluctuations on the tree. Could this be ancient magic? He wondered. Confirming the absence of danger, John reached out to touch the chaotic particles, which suddenly transformed into a snake and bit his palm. He quickly withdrew his hand, noticing a dark wound that was barely visible. These particles are very aggressive, he noted. After experimenting for a while, John conjured a ball of water from his fingertips, enveloping the chaotic particles. It seems only fey magic, another form of ancient magic, can tame them. He encapsulated 3 particles in 3 water droplets, which danced around on his hand. Grasping one, John whispered, "Show me the way." To his surprise, the drop of water pointed in a specific direction within his palm. Following this new guide, John navigated through the increasingly dense underbrush, occasionally encountering strange magical creatures that scurried away. Hagrid would be delighted to be here, he thought, kicking away a red cap that attempted to attack his knee. After the last drop of water exploded, signaling the depletion of its magic, John continued on his path. Nearly an hour later, he arrived at a wooden cabin shrouded in darkness. After a moment's consideration, John cast a disillusionment charm on himself and approached the cabin, where he heard unsettling sounds from within. The hissing and spitting resembled that of a boa constrictor, accompanied by a chilling sucking noise. Nagini, John realized, recalling the last time he heard such a voice was in the Chamber of Secrets during his first year at Hogwarts. It was a hoarse and cold voice, reminiscent of stones rubbing against each other in the cold of winter. John instinctively tightened his grip on his wand as he quietly moved closer to the cabin, which appeared to have been abandoned by its original owner, likely now reduced to bones. Inside, he saw Voldemort, the Dark Lord who had once terrorized the wizarding world, lying atop a 12-foot snake, appearing as a deformed creature reliant on venom for sustenance. Voldemort's current state of weakness sparked a sudden, overwhelming urge in John. Kill him, the thought surged through him like a flood breaking through a dam. John had previously defeated Quirrell, who was possessed by Voldemort, and the memory of Tom Riddle. Despite his past victories, John hesitated, questioning whether he could truly end Voldemort in his current state. In an effort to alter the course of history and prevent the numerous battles that might unfold at Hogwarts, John found himself contemplating a drastic act, Ion. His mind was a whirlwind of uncontrollable thoughts as he stared intently at the figure before him. Wand at the ready, he was poised to cast a killing curse or unleash fiendfire, aiming to consign the Dark Lord to the annals of history as mere dust. As the future White Demon King, Johnny Silverhand, and a recipient of the Merlin First Class Medal, he believed his actions would benefit the magical world. Visions of various futures danced through his mind. With his heart racing, John raised his wand, aiming it at the figure. Just as he was about to act, a sudden realization struck him. "Fiendfire!" he shouted decisively. The red flames roared to life, engulfing the entire log cabin in an instant. He watched as Voldemort's angry roars filled the air, and the large snake, Nagini, attempted to escape, only to be surrounded by the fiendfire. The flames transformed into a fire dragon, diving towards the cabin window. However, upon contact with a barrier, the fire morphed into a green flaming viper that turned and attacked John instead. Sweat beaded on John's forehead as he witnessed his potential fate, and all previous thoughts vanished from his mind. There's a super advanced rebound spell on it, he realized in terror. Had he proceeded with his initial plan, he would have undoubtedly been injured by the rebound spell. He also recognized that his state of mind had been compromised, similar to how Harry was influenced by the diary. Calmly retreating, John narrowly avoided falling into the Dark Lord's trap, grateful for his foresight. Once at a safe distance, John's gaze remained fixed on the cabin. His pupils dilated as he observed chaotic particles emanating from the wooden structure. Are these particles related to Voldemort? He wondered. Although he didn't recall Voldemort being versed in ancient magic, it wouldn't be surprising given his status as the Dark Lord. Upon closer inspection, John realized the particles were not emanating from Voldemort but from Nagini. Nagini, I remember Neville later destroyed it as a Horcrux, he mused. As he focused on the large snake, a voice reached him. I'm here, help me. The voice was laden with sadness, sorrow, and pain. Surprised, John looked at Nagini, noticing nothing unusual. The voice seemed to emanate from within the snake, as if someone was trapped inside. Could this be Voldemort's magic, or... John recalled hearing the call only after interacting with a book about the blood curse. He speculated that Nagini might be a victim of the blood curse, which transformed humans into snakes, granting them animagus-like powers while also subjecting them to a backlash. The origin of the blood curse is ancient, possibly ancient magic, John pondered. If his theory was correct, Nagini's original form might have been human. Knowing that Nagini would become, or perhaps already was, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, John faced a dilemma in attempting to rescue the snake. Should I seek help? He briefly considered, only to dismiss the idea. Unsure of his location and the feasibility of returning, he realized he was alone against Voldemort, a formidable adversary. It's not in my nature to walk away from a piece of ancient magic, John thought, torn between his options. He decided to wait for an opportunity, reasoning that Nagini would eventually leave the cabin to hunt or serve Voldemort. If I don't act within a week, I'll leave, he resolved, setting a deadline for himself. In the meantime, John prepared for a lengthy vigil, thankful for the provisions he had brought along in his small bag. In the original context, the passage seems to describe a makeshift solution for sustenance, likely within the magical world of Harry Potter. To enhance the clarity and quality of the text, the revised version might read, "The container, once filled with fish and various other items, had been primarily used to feed the owls. Now, however, it had found a new purpose as a source of rations." This revision corrects grammatical errors, improves sentence structure for better readability, and adds a bit of detail to make the imagery clearer. It also ensures that the actions described are logical within the context, assuming a situation where resources are being repurposed for survival or practical needs. Chapter 109, Capturing the Orochi, and a Time for Dialogue. Time is an enigma. It slips by unnoticed, yet occasionally it seems to stretch on indefinitely. After 3 restless days at the cabin, John found himself unable to remain idle any longer. An incessant urge gnawed at him, compelling him to consider casting fiendfire or a shattering curse on the cabin, as if an invisible force was relentlessly prodding him to act. "This is truly vexing," he muttered, his lips curling in annoyance. To distract himself, John immersed himself in his studies, occasionally casting a disillusionment charm on himself for practice. On the 6th day, his patience was rewarded when he finally spotted the giant serpent emerging from the cabin. He watched intently as it slithered away, calculating the distance between them. This distance isn't sufficient, he thought. To launch an effective attack, he needed to be within 10 steps of the serpent, all the while ensuring he remained outside the cabin's protective spell range. John tapped his wand against a tree trunk, casting a supersensory spell that extended 100 meters around him. This spell ensured that no disturbance, no matter how minor, could escape his notice. He waited silently for the serpent to move beyond the cabin's protective range, noting the chaotic particles that lingered in its wake. These particles, ephemeral in nature, seemed to be more concentrated within the serpent's body. With a soft exhale, John conjured a mist, reminiscent of the hazy aftermath of rain, that silently enveloped the forest. Concealed within this magical fog, he relied on his supersensory spell to track the serpent's movements, even as his own vision was obscured. He followed the serpent, which seemed unbothered by the mist, familiar with the path it had traversed countless times. Along the way, the serpent consumed a stray rabbit, fur and all, showcasing a ferocity that starkly contrasted with the delicate, miserable voice John had heard before. John continued his silent pursuit until they reached a 3-pronged tree, a landmark he recognized from his first visit. The serpent's diet seemed indiscriminate, consuming small animals and even a red hat without hesitation. Its occasional hisses were unintelligible to John, who lacked the ability to understand Parseltongue. This should be far enough, John thought, calculating the distance. Even if Voldemort were to discover them now, he wouldn't be able to close the gap quickly. John carefully donned a pair of anti-curse gloves and retrieved a bottle of black powder from his bag, a gift from Quirrell intended for a darker purpose. The powder, derived from unicorn horn, was capable of inducing a deep slumber in its victims. With meticulous care, John used wind magic to direct the powder towards the serpent. The powder, nearly invisible to the naked eye, required a keen insight to be seen. As the powder made contact with the serpent, Voldemort, lurking within the cabin, sensed the intrusion. Someone has found Nagini, he realized in alarm. No. Voldemort's realization came too late as he witnessed Nagini succumb to the powder's effects. In a desperate attempt, he unleashed a powerful curse towards John, who glanced towards the cabin just in time to see the curse barreling towards him. Reacting swiftly, John dove to the serpent's side and, grasping its tail, used apparition to escape. The two vanished with a pop, moments before the curse struck, leaving a crater in its wake. Voldemort's furious roar echoed through the cabin, its lethal intensity killing any nearby animals. Outside Belby Manor, there was a loud crack as John and the giant serpent reappeared. John's face was pale. His apparition, only at level 2, was not suited for such long-distance travel. Traveling with a snake had indeed exhausted him. Moreover, the cry he heard from Voldemort as he was leaving struck his soul, feeling as though it was squeezing his head. As expected of the second-generation Dark Lord, his strength is formidable. Even without a magic wand, he poses a great danger, he thought, his expression filled with apprehension. John couldn't help but think of Tom Riddle, the young version of Voldemort. Even in his 5th year, Riddle had demonstrated the strength of an Auror. It was difficult for John to imagine how powerful Voldemort was at his peak. Perhaps, if not for Dumbledore, Voldemort might have conquered the wizarding world long ago. After narrowly escaping death, John, despite his experience in battle, felt his heart racing. He grabbed the tail of the large snake and dragged it to Belby Manor. Dharma Alex was feeling somewhat dejected. He had just fallen asleep, but upon waking, found John gone. They had agreed to share their achievements, so why had John taken the prize and left? This thought panicked Dharma Alex. To him, losing his honor was worse than death itself. I better act first and release it in advance so he can't take it from me, Dharma Alex thought. Although his blood demon potion hadn't been tested yet, he began writing in order to preserve his honor. After several revisions, just as he was about to publish his results, John returned. Dharma Alex, do you have a dungeon or something similar here? It would be ideal if it were enchanted, John inquired, looking quite peculiar. His hair was tangled with grass roots and leaves, and his clothes were damp with dew, despite the absence of rain. But what caught Dharma Alex's attention most was the 12-foot snake John was dragging into the manor, its condition unclear. John, what have you done? Dharma Alex momentarily forgot the letter in his hand. He watched as John returned and immediately wanted to follow and ask where he had been. However, John didn't give him the chance, so Dharma Alex reluctantly led him to the Belby family's dungeon. After throwing the large snake inside, John also cast enchantment spells on the dungeon. Phew, it's finally ready. Now we have the material for our experiment, John said, pretending to wipe non-existent sweat from his brow. He glanced at Dharma Alex, who had donned a cloak and switched to a more luxurious cane, and was about to leave. Are you going out? I'm not in a hurry, Dharma Alex replied, tucking away the letter with a guilty conscience. Recalling John's earlier words, he exclaimed in surprise, You just mentioned experimental materials. John asked the house elf to prepare a cup of thick, sweet hot chocolate for him. He nodded casually and said, Yes, this is a patient afflicted with a blood curse. What? Dharma Alex, initially intending to question John further, was suddenly intrigued. He was not even deterred by the possibility of the sleeping snake waking up and rushed into the dungeon. He examined the large snake closely, eager to study this rare blood-cursed patient. I suspect that this blood-cursed being has undergone a transformation, but it seems her soul has been somewhat preserved. We can start our investigation from there, John explained, taking a sip of the thick, sweet hot chocolate the house elf had respectfully handed him. He might not have enjoyed such a sweet beverage before, but now he savored it eagerly. The warm chocolate seemed to revive his pale complexion. Why is this large snake sleeping so soundly? Dharma Alex noticed something odd about the snake. Despite his loud movements, it showed no signs of waking. John finished his hot chocolate quickly and replied nonchalantly, "Oh, I used a method similar to a sleeping spell. It will probably sleep for a few months." "How many months?" Dharma Alex pressed for details. John coughed twice, slightly embarrassed, and admitted, "About 2 or 3 months." "You cast the sleeping curse on it dozens of times, didn't you?" Dharma Alex deduced, realizing the extent of John's actions. Alex was taken aback. "If we used dozens of sleeping spells, even a fire dragon would slumber eternally. It's also John's first time employing black unicorn powder, so it's understandable that he might struggle with controlling the dosage." He stated confidently, "This situation is actually ideal. It presents us with an opportunity to conduct a test." Dharma Alex also realized the potential benefits. Given the size of the serpent, it was clear it wasn't going to be easy to handle. Testing it while it was unconscious might indeed simplify matters. John felt a wave of relief wash over him upon seeing Alex come around to his point of view. At that moment, a silver thread of light appeared before John's eyes, causing him to pause in surprise. The thread seemed to be connected to the serpent. As he reached out to touch it, a voice filled with sorrow and gentleness echoed, "Help me, end my suffering." The voice carried a tone of desperation. John took a moment to consider his response before replying, "I'm doing everything I can." His words traveled along the silver thread to the serpent, and it seemed as though the voice's owner had heard him. A note of disbelief tinged her voice. "Can you really hear me?" "Yes, so please hold on. I'm doing my best to free you from this curse," John replied, his voice softening. It appeared that the voice was able to reach him because the serpent was under the spell of sleep. Every blood-cursed being was a living tragedy, doomed through no fault of their own. "Trust me," John said with conviction. Despite the youthfulness of his voice, there was an undeniable sincerity that inspired confidence. Nagini, the serpent with a soul on the brink of shattering, found a glimmer of hope and spoke again. "Who are you?" "John Wick," he answered. As he spoke, the silver thread in his hand disintegrated and drifted towards the serpent. Their conversation came to an end. John watched the fragments of silver light in his hand, reminiscent of a broken soul. The moment was dreamlike, filled with a poignant sense of loss and hope intertwined. Chapter 110, The Road to Redemption and the Countdown to the Beginning of School. Notification, mission triggered, the road to redemption. Reward, any skill point +1, blessing of the soul walker. The system presented a redemption mission to break the blood curse, which significantly heightened John's concern for the matter. On August 21st, he suggested, "Let's add some fire ash snake eggs and test the blood magic potion this time." Despite knowing the difficulty of breaking an ancient curse, the challenge proved even more formidable than anticipated. John, with a casual toss of his coat to the house elf, watched as Dharma Alex drank a pick-me-up, causing the smoke from his ears to turn black. Together, they administered the improved blood demon potion to the sleeping giant snake. Despite their hopeful anticipation, the snake showed no change. "Failed again," Dharma Alex declared, collapsing wearily into a chair. The usual attention he paid to etiquette and demeanor vanished as he scratched his thinning hair and crossed out the formula on the parchment. John, sipping a large mouthful of thick, sweet chocolate, looked tired and remarked, "It's not just the physical changes, the patient's soul has also been eroded." "Do you suggest starting with the soul, John? The soul is a big taboo," Dharma Alex responded, looking at John with a mix of seriousness and concern. Throughout history, those mad dark wizards who delved into the study of the soul were all evil incarnate, and none met a good end. "I'm aware, Dharma Alex. You should know this isn't an easy path," John replied, rubbing his brows wearily. "I've always believed that there's no such thing as evil magic, only evil wizards. I don't want to see you stray from the right path. We're partners and friends," Dharma Alex said, standing up with difficulty. His body was emaciated, almost as if his skin was stretched over his bones. He then reactivated the dungeon's enchantment with a key from the wall. Exiting the dungeon, John was greeted by the sunset. Another day had passed in their relentless pursuit. "I fear I won't be able to accompany you much longer, my friend," he mused, with the start of school looming. Aside from the book sent by Hagrid, John had made no other preparations. In recent days, he occasionally glimpsed a silver thread, visible only to him. Dharma Alex, upon inquiry, saw nothing and could not interact with it, leading him to wonder if John was deluding himself. It seems only those versed in ancient magic can perceive it, John concluded, lost in thought. He had communicated with the spirit within the serpent, learning her name was Nagini. It's a truly vile curse, altering the body, changing the species, and destroying the soul, John reflected, horrified at the thought of the curse's creator's genius and malevolence. It felt like a chess game against an ancient entity, with the curse seemingly insurmountable. Nagini's time is running short. I must find something to fortify her soul, John resolved, aware of the increasing fragmentation of Nagini's soul, and uncertain if she would survive the year. His thoughts turned to unicorn horns, wondering if their reputed power could also mend a soul. Let's try it, he decided, his bond with Nagini deepening as he learned more about her tragic background. She was a victim of a blood curse passed down from her mother, who had raised her in a circus. Leaving Belby Manor, John sought rest, though he found little solace in sleep. Despite only needing 2 hours of sleep, he chose to linger in bed a while longer. Awakening the next day, he had slept until noon, a rarity for him. He picked up a copy of the Daily Prophet, which featured an article on Sirius Black's continued evasion of capture. Rita Skeeter's sensationalist reporting criticized the Azkaban Guard's negligence while lauding the Auror's efforts. Indeed, reading her articles is like drinking the bitterest coffee for a jolt of awareness, John mused, setting aside the newspaper with a mix of amusement and disdain. Rita Skeeter, known for her penchant for sensational journalism, certainly didn't make her statements without a purpose. She understood that visibility was key to establishing credibility. Given that Rufus Scrimgeour had become an ally, John was more than willing to lend his support. This particular incident significantly boosted Scrimgeour's profile. He appeared in numerous interviews, promising the swift capture of Sirius Black and asserting his readiness to take decisive action when necessary. Scrimgeour's firm stance quickly endeared him to the public, who found his interviews far more compelling than those of Cornelius Fudge, whose tendency to evade responsibility was well known. After adjusting his appearance, John considered a different mode of transportation for the day. Stepping outside, he summoned the night bus with a wave of his wand. The bright purple, triple-decker bus arrived promptly, and after paying the fare, John boarded. The bus navigated through streets and alleys with remarkable agility, showcasing its magical capabilities. John mused that it likely contained more enchantments than Mr. Weasley's car, though its ride was far from smooth. Inside, a wizard attempting to drink water ended up dousing himself due to the bus's erratic movements. John thought it fortunate that the beverage wasn't hot chocolate, sparing the wizard a rather unpleasant facial treatment. Upon reaching the leaky cauldron, John made his way into Diagon Alley. The bustling street, with its array of wizarding shops and crooked buildings, was as lively as ever. He noticed Florin Fusco's ice cream shop doing brisk business with its latest offering, a tomato and scrambled egg flavor inspired by the mysterious Orient. John was hesitant to try it, observing that it seemed to appeal more to older wizards than the younger generation, despite the presence of a few Hufflepuff students. Passing a Quidditch boutique, John's attention was caught by a display featuring the latest Firebolt broomstick. With the Quidditch World Cup approaching, the timing of its release was impeccable, though the price was only available upon inquiry. The shopkeeper boasted of an order from the Irish international Quidditch team, prompting John to consider the lucrative nature of broomstick sales. In the crowd, John spotted a familiar figure, but lost sight of it before he could approach. Arriving at Lyhan Bookstore, he was greeted by the prominently displayed I Swing the Great Sword at Hogwarts and a special offer on Gilderoy Lockhart's complete book series, complete with an autographed photo. The promotion was a hit, especially among witches eager for Lockhart's signature. John watched the scene unfold with amusement, silently encouraging the enthusiastic purchases. Inside, John observed the bookstore clerk, who looked utterly defeated beside a cage of biting monster books of monsters. It was clear that Hagrid's choice of textbook had left the clerk wishing never to see another copy. Fortunately, Hagrid had already provided John with his own copy, allowing him to purchase the rest of his textbooks without incident, including those for the divination class. Upon exiting the bookstore, John noticed Harry Potter, now surrounded by an enthusiastic crowd. With a sympathetic smile, John mused, "Poor Harry, I hope he grows taller in the future." John, towering with pride, watched with a hint of sympathy as Harry was jostled by the crowd. By chance, he stumbled upon the Lion bookstore, which was hosting a special event. It was also time for John to purchase a new school uniform. His rapid growth spurt had rendered his current one embarrassingly short. After securing his new uniform, John's attention was captured by a shop adorned with a large glass display window. Inside, a magnificent galaxy model encased in a glass orb commanded his gaze. He stood outside, mesmerized, and mused, "Hermione's birthday is just around the corner. She might cherish this as a gift." The price tag, however, gave him pause. Despite not being financially constrained, John couldn't help but balk at the cost. Nevertheless, he ventured inside and made the purchase, convinced of its worth as a present for Hermione. With the galaxy model in hand, John exited Diagon Alley and with a swift motion apparated back home. The start of the school term was only 10 days away, and there was much to prepare for. Yet in that moment, John felt a warm satisfaction in finding a thoughtful gift for his friend, a small beacon of light in the bustling chaos of their magical world. Chapter 111, Ice Cream and Twin Kidnapping. The healing properties of unicorn horn are well documented, and John had utilized this knowledge to concoct a potion for Nagini, using powdered unicorn horn. Upon their next interaction, Nagini's condition had markedly improved. "Thank you. I'm feeling much better," she expressed, her voice devoid of the previous misery. For once, she didn't feel isolated in her suffering. John, relieved, responded, "I'm glad to hear you're doing well." Revitalized, Nagini engaged in conversation with a newfound lightness in her tone. "It's been so long since I've been able to have a normal conversation. Usually it's it that initiates." "It?" John seized on the keyword, curious. "Who is it?" "The blood curse. It's taken control of my body, relegating my soul to the shadows," Nagini revealed. John pondered this. A blood curse with its own consciousness? This was a new and troubling concept. As their conversation unfolded, he learned more about the nature of the blood curse. Initially weak, like an infant, the curse would grow stronger over time, eventually transforming the host into a creature of the curse. Once fully matured, the curse would dominate the host's body, leaving the original soul powerless and trapped. This blood curse, it possesses a soul, John concluded, his brow furrowed in thought. This was no ordinary soul. It was intricately linked to Nagini, almost to the point of being inseparable. It was, for lack of a better term, demonic. "A spell targeting the soul," he murmured, eyeing Nagini's serpentine form. Healing Nagini had inadvertently also strengthened the blood curse. Then the solution is to break and rebuild. A determined light sparked in John's eyes. If the curse was bound to the soul, then the solution was to sever that bond. However, he was acutely aware of the risks involved. The process would be excruciating, potentially fatal. If removing Fenrir's arm was akin to a cut, then freeing Nagini would be like tearing the soul apart. The slightest mistake could obliterate it entirely. "You need to be fully prepared," he cautioned, taking a deep breath. Though he had identified a potential solution, the path forward remained daunting. The blood demon potion could break the curse, but it required simultaneous manipulation of the soul. The blood curse is akin to permanent transfiguration. If I use the animagus approach, a new idea began to form in John's mind, involving another form of transfiguration that required a specific ritual and potion. "I'll need to search the records at Hogwarts," he decided, the silver light in his hand dissipating as their conversation concluded. The prospect of starting school had never been more appealing. August 31st. Only one day remained until the start of the school year. John made his way to Diagon Alley, eager to escape his father's eccentric requests. Watson Wick had taken to asking John for increasingly fantastical feats, the latest being a mouse capable of cooking, inspired by too many viewings of Ratatouille. Despite Watson's attempts to train Tom, their dog, into a culinary prodigy, John recognized the absurdity of these endeavors. Preferring to spare Tom from any further outlandish experiments, John departed a day early for the leaky cauldron. He mused to himself about the limits of magic and his father's boundless imagination. Upon arrival, John noticed Tom's sullen demeanor. "Feeling a bit gloomy?" he asked, understanding his dog's longing for adventure. Despite his attempt at consolation, reminding Tom of his youth and inexperience compared to the savvy street dogs, it seemed to do little to lift Tom's spirits. Tom, now questioning his place in the world, found a distraction in Basil, John's other pet, and chased after him in a playful attempt to groom him. Shaking his head at the scene, John set out for Diagon Alley, not for supplies, but to satisfy a peculiar craving. He had heard tales of an ice cream parlor that served flavors as bizarre as tomato and scrambled egg, and even mapo tofu. Intrigued by the culinary creativity, John was eager to taste these unconventional treats for himself. Transformed into ice cream, John made his way to Diagon Alley. The last time he visited, Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor was bustling with customers, but today it seemed much quieter, likely due to some less appealing menu additions. As he approached, John spotted a familiar face among the sparse crowd, a black girl who, upon noticing him, exclaimed in surprise, "John!" Puzzled, John blinked a few times before recognition dawned on him as the girl smiled broadly, revealing her bright teeth. "Hermione, why are you so dark?" The trio was all there, having already purchased their school supplies. Observing Hermione effortlessly carrying a large bag of books, John couldn't help but wonder if she had taken up some secret strength training. Hermione, puffing up with pride, explained, "I went to France too." "I know, but did you go for a tan? Ron went to Egypt and didn't come back nearly as tanned as you," John remarked, only for Hermione to shoot him a glare. Shifting his attention to Ron, John noticed he was still accompanied by Scabbers. After winning the lottery, Mr. Weasley had intended to buy Ron a new wand, but it turned out the wand John had crafted was perfectly suited for Ron, a fact even Ollivander had praised, saving the Weasleys a considerable amount of money. As they caught up, the conversation inevitably turned to Harry's latest escapade. Ron couldn't help but laugh at the incident with his inflated aunt, while Hermione understood the gravity of the situation. Harry himself realized how fortunate he was not to be expelled, especially since John had downplayed the seriousness, making Harry believe it wasn't a big deal. With Hermione's birthday approaching, her parents had given her 10 galleons as a gift. She planned to buy an owl, much like Harry's Hedwig, Ron's Errol, and John's Basil. Ron, meanwhile, intended to purchase some medicine for his depressed pet, Scabbers. The trio decided to make the trip together, leaving John behind as he waited for his ice cream. John's order soon arrived, featuring 3 distinct flavors. The first, scrambled eggs with tomato, surprisingly wasn't as bad as he feared, though the mapo tofu flavor that followed was a different story entirely, eliciting a strong reaction from John. The final flavor, cantaloupe, offered a much-needed reprieve. Determined not to suffer alone, John bought 20 ice creams, 10 of each bizarre flavor, to share the experience with his friends. He magically preserved them in a small bag and headed back to the leaky cauldron, only to be intercepted by Fred and George Weasley. "John, perfect timing," they chimed in unison, their tones suggesting they had a proposition. "We have a deal for you. Great value. Just follow us." Their synchronized speech was unmistakable, and without needing further explanation, John knew he was being led into one of the twins' schemes. As they passed Gringotts and ventured deeper, heading towards Nocturne Alley, John felt a mix of amusement and apprehension. The twins, smirking, finally revealed their plan involved a letter from Silverhand Angel Investment, hinting at an innovative idea, a product, and the involvement of a qualified young genius. Upon hearing Fred and George's simultaneous declaration, "That genius is you," John was taken aback. They were suggesting that he should pitch to the silver-handed angel investor. The Weasley twins were well aware of John's exceptional alchemy skills, which is why they thought of him for this endeavor. However, the situation struck John as peculiar. Interviewing with a silver-handed angel investor meant interviewing himself. He couldn't help but marvel at the twins' ambition. "You two are merely in your 5th year, and already you're thinking about entrepreneurship?" he mused. John found it amusing yet impressive. Indeed, The 5th year at Hogwarts seems to be a pivotal time, he reflected. Voldemort embarked on creating Horcruxes in his 5th year, and here you are, Amy, to secure your first fortune at the same stage. This comparison highlighted the stark contrast between the paths chosen by individuals at similar points in their lives. While Voldemort delved into the dark arts, Fred and George were channeling their energies into a venture that could potentially bring them success and innovation. John couldn't help but admire their spirit and determination, even as he grappled with the oddity of potentially negotiating with himself as the investor. Chapter 112, The Flat-Faced Cat and the Start of School. Since Mundungus Fletcher received a stern warning, he no longer dared to act recklessly. The sight of Johnny Silverhand's formidable magic had left him with no room for resistance. Consequently, the responsibility for managing the Little Wizard Fund was transferred from Mundungus to Tang Mi. John found this situation less than ideal, recognizing the need for someone with a keen business acumen. For the time being, however, Tang Mi would have to suffice. The Silverhand Johnny Specialty Store had recently introduced a new feature, the Silverhand Angel Investment Service. Tang Mi, stationed at the service window, found himself overwhelmed by a constant stream of wizards, each boasting their own brilliant ideas. To him, it felt as though he was nothing more than an exhibit, surrounded by curious onlookers. One day, the Weasley twins firmly escorted John to the window, making it clear to Tang Mi that yet another wizard had arrived, harboring dreams of securing an investment. With a casual glance and a sigh, Tang Mi braced himself for what was to come. "We're here to apply for the Silverhand Angel investment," they announced. "Just 100 galleons." The twins' request left John visibly uncomfortable, while Tang Mi was taken aback, his expression turning incredulous. 100 galleons? He echoed, struggling to comprehend their audacity. Did they underestimate his boss, or were they simply oblivious to the extent of Johnny Silverhand's wealth? John, sensing Tang Mi's skepticism, quickly interjected, "As you can see, we're just Hogwarts students with big dreams. School is starting soon, and we plan to use owl mail for deliveries." Understanding the urgency in John's eyes, Tang Mi regained his composure. "If that's the case, then the amount seems reasonable," he conceded. "Owl mail? John, you're a genius. This could revolutionize how we sell to schools." The Weasley twins' faces lit up at the acknowledgement of their idea. It was a moment of validation from John Wick, known throughout their grade for his exceptional intellect and creativity. Tang Mi, playing along, took out a form and offered it to the twins with a smile. "Let's outline a detailed business plan, including your short-term and long-term goals, main products, and target markets. We'll review it and get back to you as soon as possible." The twins, filled with excitement, accepted the form and handed it to John, who looked at them with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. It was his form, after all, designed to vet potential investments and weed out those looking to make a quick galleon. "This is your vision," he reminded them. "No one knows it better than you." As the Weasley twins took the form back, carefully storing it away, they couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose. Their mother had always hoped they would follow in their father's footsteps and work at the Ministry of Magic, but they craved a different path, one filled with laughter and innovation. Opening a joke shop was their dream, and with 100 galleons as their starting capital, they were one step closer to making it a reality after graduation. John, declining the twins' offer to celebrate with a new ice cream flavor, returned to the Leaky Cauldron. There, he found Tom contentedly munching on dog food, while Basil, the flat-faced cat, perched aloofly on a high shelf, half asleep. From the room next door, the sound of a student's panicked screams echoed, likely the result of an unfortunate encounter with the Monster Book of Monsters. It was a reminder that the Weasleys, like many others, were preparing for another year at Hogwarts, each with their own dreams and challenges ahead. John initially harbored a dislike for the Leaky Cauldron, expecting it to mirror the grimy exterior of the bar. However, he was pleasantly surprised to find the interior quite clean. Venturing downstairs for a meal, he unexpectedly ran into Mr. Weasley. "John Wick, thank you for helping Harry and the others," Mr. Weasley expressed his gratitude, warmly, shaking John's hand. Beside him, Molly Weasley approached and enveloped John in a hug. The contrasting figures of Mr. Weasley, tall and lean, and Mrs. Weasley, shorter and more robust, perfectly embodied the loving yet firm parenting that kept their 7 children in line. "Are you hungry, dear? I've just baked a pie," Mrs. Weasley offered, her kindness making John feel at home, a sentiment usually reserved for Harry. At the dining table, John observed Hermione and Ron in the midst of an argument over Hermione's new pet, Crookshanks, and its apparent vendetta against Ron's pet rat, Scabbers. Their bickering resembled that of a young couple, drawing John's attention to Crookshanks. The cat, with its squashed face and ginger fur, looked both fierce and adorable. Without a word, John took out a dried fish and tossed it to Crookshanks, who caught it deftly, showcasing an intelligence beyond that of a normal cat. During the meal, Percy Weasley's newfound status as student council president was the subject of both admiration and jest, especially from his brothers. Percy's pride in his badge was evident, and even Harry and Ron couldn't help but compare him to a ministry official. "It's a pleasure to meet you here," Percy greeted John, who returned the sentiment with congratulations on his election. Their exchange hinted at a deeper connection, leaving the younger siblings curious about John's involvement. After dinner, John retreated to his room, only to be drawn out by the sound of an argument. It was Percy, now missing his badge, accusing Ron of mischief. Harry, seeking to defuse the situation, volunteered to retrieve some lost medicine. John suspected the twins were behind the disappearance, a theory supported by their history of pranks. Descending to retrieve a forgotten glass ball, John caught Harry eavesdropping outside a room. Teasing Harry about his unexpected behavior, John retrieved his item and found Harry hiding from the Weasleys. Arthur Weasley's awkward greeting to John hinted at the sensitive nature of their conversation. Harry, troubled by what he overheard, was grappling with the news of Sirius Black's escape and his apparent targeting of Harry. Despite the fear surrounding Sirius, Harry resolved not to be intimidated. He also pondered the Ministry of Magic's leniency towards him, a stance clarified by Minister Fudge's personal visit, which was more about relief at Harry's well-being than punishment. This encounter with the Weasleys and the unfolding events around Sirius Black added layers to John's understanding of the magical world, intertwining his fate with Harry's in unforeseen ways. In the dimly lit bar, Harry voiced his concerns with a hint of despondency. "John, do others really see me as that timid?" Mrs. Weasley's apprehensions about the truth frightening Harry were evident, and Mr. Weasley too harbored fears of Harry acting rashly. John, observing the emo saviors around them, was momentarily at a loss for words. However, he responded with patience. "If you're open to sharing what's been troubling you, I might be able to provide some clarity." Harry recounted Sirius's mention of Hogwarts and the possibility of him coming after Harry. John, stroking his chin thoughtfully, considered Harry's physical condition and concluded that it was indeed uncertain whether Harry could handle an encounter with Sirius. Yet, he couldn't dismiss Mrs. Weasley's concerns as unfounded, given that Hogwarts was under Dumbledore's protection, a factor that even Voldemort would have to consider carefully. Seeing Harry's worried expression, John reassured him. "Don't frighten yourself over this. Whether you're aware of it or not, this situation won't directly impact you." Harry found solace in John's words, realizing that with Sirius being pursued by the Ministry of Magic, Aurors, and Azkaban guards, it was highly unlikely he would make it to Hogwarts. This thought brought him some peace, and he proceeded to the private room where the Weasleys were to fetch medicine for Scabbers. Upon ascending the stairs, they encountered the twins playfully tormenting Percy by transforming his badge into a caricature. This was not an uncommon occurrence, prompting John to retire to his room for some rest. The following morning dawned bright and early, signaling the day of their departure to the station. John, who would have preferred to apparate, found it impractical in the presence of others, and graciously accepted Mr. Weasley's offer to travel together. It was immediately apparent to John that the driver of the car was an Auror, characterized by his competence and constant vigilance. Chapter 113, Dementors and Albatrosses. The Ministry of Magic personnel had come to ensure Harry's safety, granting John the unusual privilege of having the Ministry clear the way for him. Upon reaching the station, Mr. Weasley remained vigilant, accompanying Harry into Station 9 3/4. John and Percy, the latter serving as the student council president, entered together, engaging in conversation. "This year seems to be shaping up as another eventful one," Percy remarked in a tone befitting his official role, lowering his voice, "and it seems trouble always finds Harry." Feeling compelled to agree with Percy, John nodded, casting a glance at the ministry officials scattered around the station. "We must remain alert, even on the train," he advised calmly. Acknowledging the shared sentiment, Percy and John boarded the train, heading in separate directions due to their respective duties. As prefects and presidents, they had special compartments and were expected to patrol regularly. As John made his way to his carriage, the Weasley twins, Fred and George, caught up with him from behind. "What pearls of wisdom did Lord Percy share with you?" George asked with a dramatic flair. Fred, tapping his temple, shook his head and joked, "Perhaps he's inviting John to join their illustrious company." Despite the apparent tension among the brothers, John, seeing the twins ready to depart, offered, "If you need anything, feel free to ask." Unperturbed by his comment, the twins lifted John with practiced ease and escorted him into a carriage, where they found Gryffindor's Lee Jordan, who was known for keeping a venomous spider as a pet. "We can't tease the Slytherins here," Lee protested as the twins ushered John inside. "Quiet, Lee Jordan." The twins chided before turning their attention to John, sandwiching him between them. John was puzzled. After their meeting the previous day, he had approved the twins' future plans as Johnny the Silver Hand. Why were they seeking his help now? Their eyes gleaming with mischief, George said with a grin, "John, your idea for owl mail is brilliant." Fred added, smirking, "If you could share the specifics with us, you'd be the cleverest Slytherin around." Realizing they were still intrigued by the Owl Express plan, John arched an eyebrow. "And what's in it for me?" He wasn't one to give away ideas without something in return. The twins, usually not serious, offered a rare moment of sincerity. "We could offer you a share of the profits, funding, or even help with pranks," they proposed. After a moment's thought, considering the twins' mediocre grades but impressive talent in alchemy inherited from Mr. Weasley, John saw potential. "All right, funding will do, but I'm interested in starting a society you might want to join," he proposed, seeing beyond mere financial gain to the value of their partnership. "It's a deal," the twins agreed in unison. Feeling left out, Lee Jordan quickly interjected, "I want in on any club you're forming." "As long as you don't mind Slytherins," John replied with a shrug, indifferent to the house divisions. At the mention of Slytherins, Lee, a staunch Gryffindor, hesitated, his enthusiasm waning. As the train began its journey, Percy passed by outside the compartment. The twins resumed their playful griping about their brother, prompting John to suggest Fred move across to make more room. Despite the cramped seating, the four engaged in lively conversation, setting the stage for an eventful year ahead. As the twins discussed their aspirations of opening a joke shop, and Lee Jordan expressed his ambition to become a Quidditch commentator post-graduation, John couldn't help but comment on Lee's biased commentary style, joking that few would appreciate his approach. Initially, John and Lee Jordan weren't well acquainted, but Lee's great sense of humor quickly bridged the gap between them. As they engaged in conversation, the train gradually came to a halt. John, puzzled, peered outside, realizing they hadn't reached Hogwarts yet. Curious students began to step out of their compartments to investigate the cause. It was then that John noticed the windows fogging up with a white mist, a sign of the sudden drop in temperature. "Why has it suddenly become so cold?" George asked, rubbing his arms for warmth. At that moment, Fred noticed Malfoy and his younger brother striding past their compartment with an air of arrogance. The train's lights flickered and went out, followed by a chorus of terrified screams from outside. As the carriage door slid open, an ominous presence seemed to enter. "George, let's switch places," John suggested, sensing something amiss outside the window. The temperature continued to plummet. In a state of panic, Malfoy barged into their compartment, followed closely by Goyle and Crabbe, making the space uncomfortably crowded. John, feeling the pressure of someone's body against him, stepped out of the compartment with a scowl. As he walked along the corridor, John observed the Dementors systematically opening each compartment door. These creatures, clad in tattered cloaks and appearing as though drenched, with scabbed palms and a decaying aura, were unmistakably Azkaban's wardens. The sight of the Dementors feasting on the happiness of young wizards caused John's brows to furrow in disgust. Noticing John, several Dementors began to approach him, draining the joy from his surroundings. "There's no one here you're looking for," John stated coldly, yet the Dementors continued their advance. In a moment of urgency, Malfoy urged, "John, get inside!" But John stood his ground. As a Dementor loomed before him, he decisively cast Expecto Patronum. A silver mist erupted from his wand, repelling the Dementor as if it were facing its natural enemy. John's efforts intensified, and from the silver light, an albatross materialized. The majestic bird soared past each carriage, its touch sending the Dementors into disarray with their incomprehensible shrieks, ultimately driving them from the train. In a rear compartment, another Patronus charm was activated, dispersing the Dementors with a burst of silver mist. Lupin, witnessing the scene, was taken aback by the presence of another wizard on the train, capable of conjuring such a powerful Patronus. The Dementors were chased away, leaving the young wizards to emerge from their compartments, shaken but unharmed, marveling at the albatross as it circled back to John. "You did it, John. You're a hero," Lee Jordan exclaimed, leading a round of cheers. John, however, was concerned about the implications of the Dementors' intrusion. These Dementors were far too bold to enter the train. If Dumbledore allows these creatures into the school, it's not just Sirius who will be in danger, but the students as well, he mused. "Percy, what just happened? Was that a Patronus?" Percy inquired, arriving with the prefects just in time to witness the aftermath. John explained the situation gravely. "Dementors. They feed on happiness. I need you to check if anyone has been harmed." Understanding the gravity of the situation, Percy and the prefects commenced a thorough check of the compartments, finding that only Harry had fainted. "Stupid and cowardly Potter," Malfoy sneered mercilessly. John cast him a glance, remembering Malfoy's earlier desperation to find refuge in their compartment. It was a moment of irony that wasn't lost on him. With a flick of his wand, John cast the Esperation spell, knocking on the carriage door, signaling the end of the ordeal and the continuation of their journey to Hogwarts. John noticed that the Dementors hadn't departed, but instead congregated ominously above the train, casting a palpable shadow of fear. Suddenly, a Patronus, radiant and phoenix-like, burst forth, scattering the Dementors into the ether. It was Dumbledore who had conjured the spell, and shortly after, the train jolted back to life, resuming its journey. In the aftermath, the Malfoy trio found themselves unceremoniously ejected from their carriage by the twins, an act that drew a mix of reactions from the passengers. Concerned for the safety and well-being of everyone on board, John decided to take a proactive step. He joined the prefects, offering his assistance in patrolling the train. His presence was not only welcomed, but also brought a comforting sense of security to the team, a testament to his growing reputation and abilities. As the train finally pulled into Hogsmeade Station, John's eyes immediately sought out Hagrid, who stood with a grave expression on his face. It was clear that Hagrid was also aware of the Dementor's presence, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by one of caution and vigilance. Sensing a shared concern, John approached him with a greeting, acknowledging the unspoken tension that lingered in the air. Their exchange was brief but meaningful, a moment of mutual understanding between two individuals bound by their dedication to the safety of Hogwarts and its inhabitants. Chapter 114, Two Professors and One Exchange Student. On the Thestral-drawn carriage, the journey to Hogwarts was somewhat bumpy. Daphne, seizing the opportunity, squeezed closer to John, letting the awkwardness of the previous semester melt away. Malfoy, with his usual air of superiority, brought along his cronies, Goyle and Crabbe, effectively distancing himself from the Weasley twins, who could only grit their teeth in annoyance at his smug demeanor. Upon their arrival at Hogwarts, John noticed the Thestrals seemed particularly exhausted, likely burdened by the weight of Goyle and Crabbe. It wasn't long before Malfoy resumed his routine taunting, this time targeting Harry about his fainting incident on the train, much to Harry's dismay. However, before John could ponder further, he was unexpectedly summoned by Professor McGonagall. leaving him concerned about the widespread knowledge of Harry's fainting spell. As John sat in the Great Hall, his attention was drawn to a mysterious figure lurking in the shadows. His curiosity piqued when he spotted a new professor among the familiar faces. Professor Kettleburn, the former Care of Magical Creatures teacher, had retired, making way for Hagrid. Yet, it was the presence of Remus Lupin, looking notably less shabby thanks to John's generosity with clothing, that caught John's eye. Despite Lupin's improved attire, the signs of a hard life were evident in his gray hair and pronounced wrinkles. John couldn't help but sense an underlying tension between Lupin and another professor, sparking his curiosity about their past. Amidst his musings, John's hunger grew, a reminder of the energy he had expended casting the Patronus charm. His thoughts were interrupted when Professor Flitwick, standing on a stool due to his short stature, began the sorting hat ceremony. Just when it seemed the ceremony was concluding, Flitwick announced an unexpected name: Heinrich Edgar. The revelation of an exchange student from Durmstrang stirred a buzz among the students. Durmstrang's reputation for teaching dark arts cast a shadow of intrigue and apprehension over Heinrich's arrival. His pale complexion only added to the mystique, leaving some students feeling uneasy. The Sorting Hat's immediate decision to place Heinrich in Slytherin only fueled the whispers and speculation. John, recalling the letter he had received from Heinrich, wondered about the implications of his arrival. Malfoy's excitement at seeing Heinrich was palpable, but it quickly turned to surprise when Heinrich coldly instructed Malfoy to move aside. Without hesitation, Heinrich approached John and took Malfoy's seat, his pale skin almost glowing in the dim light of the Great Hall. Their reunion was brief but significant, with Heinrich stating, "I said we would meet again." The exchange hinted at a deeper connection and perhaps a shared purpose that would unfold in the days to come. As the Great Hall buzzed with the arrival of the new term and the mysterious exchange student, John couldn't help but feel that this year at Hogwarts would be unlike any other. Reunited once more, John couldn't help but smile wryly as he extended his hand in greeting. "Even though we've met before, I still want to extend a warm welcome to you." Heinrich Edgar, with a straightforwardness characteristic of his lineage, declared, "The Edgars align themselves with the strong, and I choose to follow you." The Edgar family was known for their loyalty to power, serving as the right hand to those who wielded it. John, amused by Heinrich's declaration, responded with a light smile, "Then you'll have to keep pace with me." Heinrich's laughter echoed John's amusement, while Malfoy could only look on in dismay. "What happened to friendship? The moment you arrive, you take my place and even win over my allies." It's just, no matter, I can't compete with that." With a sullen expression, Malfoy pushed Goyle aside and took his seat, feeling defeated. Upon Harry and the others' return, Dumbledore took the opportunity to introduce Heinrich Edgar to the ski pool. Ron wagered, "I'll bet a sickle that he's definitely a vampire." Harry, intrigued by the mention of an exchange student from Durmstrang, a school he had just learned about and one reputed for its dark arts education, couldn't help but suspect Heinrich of being a dark wizard. Dumbledore went on to introduce two new professors, Remus Lupin and Rubus Hagrid, to everyone's astonishment, especially at the sight of Hagrid becoming a professor. The choice of a biting book as a textbook seemed all too fitting for Hagrid. "Our school is currently hosting several Dementors from Azkaban, sent here by the Ministry of Magic to perform official duties. As you're aware, they conducted a search on the Hogwarts Express," Dumbledore announced, pausing to glance at John, who was lamenting the lack of food. "I must caution you against attacking the Dementors. They are extremely dangerous and are stationed at every school entrance. No one is to leave without authorization. Remember, no tricks or disguises, including the invisibility cloak, can deceive a Dementor." This warning seemed directed particularly at Harry, with Dumbledore emphasizing the futility of pleading for mercy from these creatures. As Dumbledore concluded his speech, the feast began, much to John's delight. He voraciously devoured a sausage, setting a pace that Heinrich, determined not to be outdone, tried to match by abandoning his usual decorum. However, Heinrich quickly found himself overwhelmed by the quantity of food, while John continued to eat as if the food simply vanished upon reaching his mouth. The result was Heinrich's first day ending with a visit to the school hospital, a testament to the poor quality of Durmstrang's meals. As the meal wound down, John polished off the last piece of chicken and wiped his mouth, leaving no leftovers behind. Daphne watched him, starry-eyed, admiring how even his eating was charismatic. John then approached Hagrid to offer his congratulations, joined by the trio of Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Hagrid's enthusiastic embrace and gratitude for John's input on his courses left Ron feeling a bit left out. "You knew all along. Why didn't you tell us?" he complained. John simply shrugged, aiming to keep an element of surprise. "I wanted to surprise you," he explained, though Ron seemed only begrudgingly satisfied, still nursing a grudge over his bitten pants. With the day coming to a close, John returned to his dormitory. After a brief stay, he ventured out for a nocturnal exploration, his mind set on the Room of Requirement. Inside the Gryffindor Chamber of Secrets, he delved into research on souls, though he found the collection somewhat lacking, perhaps reflecting Gryffindor's disinterest in such matters. In the depths of the Forbidden Forest, hidden away from prying eyes, lay the entrance to the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets. This chamber, unlike any other, was a repository of ancient and powerful knowledge, holding within its stone walls a vast collection of research manuscripts. Among these manuscripts, the topic of Horcruxes stood out, a dark and forbidden subject that had intrigued and horrified many throughout the ages. As he ventured into the chamber, it became evident that the creator of these manuscripts, Salazar Slytherin himself, harbored a complex relationship with the concept of Horcruxes. The manuscripts were not merely academic. They were a testament to a deep-seated conflict. The pages, worn and tattered, bore the marks of frustration and disdain. It was as if Slytherin, in his quest for immortality, had come to a profound realization about the true nature of Horcruxes and the price one must pay for such dark magic. The evidence of Slytherin's dissatisfaction was unmistakable. Pages were torn, notes were scribbled in the margins, and entire sections were crossed out, as if in a fit of rage. It was clear that Slytherin, despite his initial fascination with the dark arts, had grown to regret his association with Horcruxes. This revelation painted a complex picture of a man torn between his thirst for power and the moral implications of his actions. As he delved deeper into the manuscripts, it became apparent that Slytherin's research was not just a pursuit of dark magic, but a journey of self-discovery and repentance. The chamber, once thought to be a mere storehouse of forbidden knowledge, revealed itself to be a chronicle of Slytherin's inner turmoil and his eventual rejection of the dark path he had once walked. The Slytherin Chamber of Secrets, with its ancient manuscripts and the echoes of its creator's conflicted soul, stood as a reminder of the dangers of delving too deeply into the dark arts. It was a testament to the fact that even the most powerful wizards must tread carefully on the path to immortality, lest they lose themselves in the process. Chapter 115, The Secret of the Soul and the Prophecy of Doom. It was hard to imagine that Salazar Slytherin, one of the revered founders of Hogwarts, would choose to live a life of obscurity, akin to an insect. His pride was too great to allow him to fade into the background, which is why he abandoned his research on Horcruxes. John speculated that Voldemort might have discovered the concept of Horcruxes in this very place. The records hinted at the existence of Horcruxes, but lacked detailed instructions. However, John's immediate concern was unraveling the mystery of soul separation. Deep within the Chamber of Secrets, John was surrounded by mountains of ancient texts and artifacts. It was no wonder that Salazar Slytherin's ideological differences with Godric Gryffindor were so profound. The chamber housed a treasure trove of knowledge, far surpassing the collection in the restricted section of the library. Slytherin's contributions to the magical world were not only groundbreaking, but also timeless. Immersed in these ancient wisdoms, John's understanding of magic, particularly in the realm of the spiritual, deepened significantly. Time and soul, two untouchable taboos, whispered legends in the magical world, foretelling doom for those who dared to explore these mysteries. Undeterred, John spent his nights in the secret chamber, absorbing knowledge like a parched sponge soaking up water. The following day, John faced the logistical nightmare of his ambitious course selection. At 9 a.m., his divination, Muggle studies, and arithmancy classes were scheduled simultaneously. Despite anticipating this conflict, it still caused him a headache. How did Hermione manage this, he wondered. In the auditorium, John encountered Heinrich and Malfoy. By a stroke of luck, Malfoy had chosen arithmancy. John, seizing the opportunity, presented Malfoy with a star badge, much to the latter's astonishment and delight. However, John quickly clarified, "Don't misunderstand. I'm giving this to you so you can attend the class on my behalf and share what you learn." The badge was part of a strategy to split the screen for attending multiple classes at once. Malfoy's excitement waned while Heinrich, intrigued by the badge, requested one for himself. Recognizing Heinrich's prowess as a top student from Durmstrang, John complied, igniting a flare of jealousy in Malfoy. "Why does he get one?" Malfoy protested, feeling slighted. John's succinct reply, "He is strong enough," left Malfoy at a loss for words. The previous day, a rumor had spread that John had chosen Slytherin, leading to an impromptu duel between Heinrich and some Slytherin students. Despite not being as effortlessly dominant as John, Heinrich's performance solidified his reputation. Even Malfoy, attempting to challenge his friend, ended up petrified for hours. Slytherin House, now teeming with combatants eager to prove their strength, had adopted a new mantra, "Power comes first," overshadowing the traditional emphasis on pureblood lineage. With arithmancy and divination sorted, John sought a proxy for Muggle studies. Daphne Greengrass volunteered, captivated by the badge. Handing it over, John was met with a grateful smile from Daphne. As class time neared, John's curiosity about divination grew. He possessed a latent prophetic ability that had yet to manifest, and he hoped that divination might unlock his potential. Breakfast that morning had its own drama. The Weasley twins, noting Heinrich's vampiric appearance, spiked his milk with garlic essence. Heinrich's reaction was swift. After spitting out the tainted milk, he brandished his wand, seeking retribution. The twins, leveraging their knowledge of Hogwarts' nooks and crannies, made a quick escape. "Oh, how childish," John said, shaking his head in mild exasperation. He reached into his small bag and pulled out a mapo tofu-flavored ice cream, offering it to Malfoy. Malfoy devoured it, his expression contorted as if he had just ingested something utterly repulsive. Unfazed, John announced he was heading to class Fear, Staint. The divination classroom was located in the astronomy tower, a place John had yet to explore. Thankfully, he had the Marauder's map to guide him. Upon reaching the astronomy tower, he noticed a trapdoor. Before closing the map, he failed to observe an oddity. 3 Hermiones were indicated on it. The trapdoor released a ladder, and John ascended to find several students, including Neville, had already arrived. "Early as always, Neville," John greeted as he approached. The classroom was an eclectic mix of an attic and a tea house, featuring small round tables surrounded by calico armchairs and bulging poufs. A dim red light bathed everything, with curtains tightly drawn and lamps shrouded in large crimson scarves, creating a stifling atmosphere. A fire blazed under the mantelpiece, heating a large copper teapot. The tea it brewed had a pungent aroma that was somewhat off-putting. John found a seat and soon noticed Professor Sybil Trelawney emerging from the shadows. She embodied the quintessential image of a fortune-teller, a slender figure exaggerated by large glasses that magnified her eyes, adorned with an array of beads, chains, bracelets, and rings. John couldn't help but think of Harry's prophecy as he observed her. Despite her eccentric appearance, there was an undeniable accuracy to her predictions. Professor Trelawney, sensing something unique in John, approached him with a sudden intensity. "My dear, I sense a remarkable talent within you," she said, her voice taking on an ethereal quality that captivated the classroom. She placed her hands over John's eyes, urging him to relax and connect with his aura, which she claimed was exceptionally bright. Under her guidance, John felt a surge of colors behind his closed eyes. "Now tell me, what do you see?" she asked, releasing him. "I saw Hermione and the others entering," John replied, just as the trio walked into the classroom. The students were astounded by the accuracy of John's vision. Harry, puzzled, sought clarification from Neville, who explained John's prediction with admiration. Hermione, skeptical, reasoned they had simply encountered John earlier. Both Harry and Ron shared her doubts, suspecting a jest at play with Professor Trelawney. However, Professor Trelawney was thrilled by John's apparent gift, lamenting how her own punctuality and predictions were often dismissed by others, even her fellow professors. Seeing John as an opportunity to validate her abilities, she encouraged him to delve deeper. "Let go and allow the celestial eye to guide you," she instructed, eager to see what further visions John might reveal. John suddenly found himself enveloped in a profound sense of oblivion. In that moment, it was as if he could perceive far beyond the ordinary. To the onlookers, it was a startling transformation. John's eyes snapped open, revealing an expanse of pure whiteness. A palpable tension radiated from him, causing a stir among those present. In a sudden, forceful gesture, he seized Professor Trelawney's hands, eliciting a sharp intake of breath from her. When the moon is full and wolves howl in unison with dogs, as rats flee and distant elders reunite, those ignorant of the truth will be crippled, and transgressors will be engulfed by the dark tide, John intoned, his voice taking on an almost melodic quality. The room fell into a chilling silence, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. Professor Trelawney, taken aback by the intensity of the moment, had not anticipated such a powerful effect. As John emerged from the trance-like state, he noticed Professor Trelawney's shocked expression. "Sorry, Professor, I didn't mean to," he apologized, quickly releasing her hands. Professor Trelawney, managing a strained smile, reassured him. "It's all right, my child, you've succeeded." The classroom buzzed with a mix of relief and excitement, akin to the aftermath of an explosion. "A prophecy of death foretold by the black tide," one student murmured. "John Wick has predicted death," another whispered in awe. Skepticism and curiosity clashed as the students debated the authenticity of John's prophecy. "Can we really believe this, or is it all just a deception?" someone questioned. Amidst the chaos, even Hermione, a known skeptic of divination, found herself grappling with doubt. Harry, overhearing the mention of a howling dog, furrowed his brow in concern, his thoughts drifting to the mysterious black dog he had encountered. The lesson had certainly provided ample fodder for speculation and gossip among the young wizards. In no time, rumors of John's ominous prophecy spread throughout the school like wildfire, igniting a flurry of whispers and speculation about the foretold events. Chapter 116, Hagrid's Lesson and Buckbeak. During the next divination class, the students displayed an unprecedented level of interest. Unfortunately, John found himself in the minority. As they practiced tea leaf divination, John placed his badge in front of him. With a mere touch of his finger, images similar to projections appeared on it. Despite his absence from class, Professor Sybil Trelawney chose to ignore it. Hermione, puzzled and intrigued, recalled the item Professor McGonagall had given her the day before. Wasn't that supposed to be with John? Intriguingly, John's image was also projected in 2 other classrooms, leaving the professors both surprised and unprepared for such an innovative approach. John's dedication and eagerness to learn allowed him to not only keep up with the lessons, but also actively participate in them. Is it difficult? John mused upon seeing his future troubles in the tea leaves, wondering what challenges awaited him at Hogwarts. Upon sharing his findings with Professor Trelawney, he was immediately awarded points. Professor Trelawney, seeing John's natural talent for prophecy, began to regard him as a potential successor, a talent she had not seen outside her own family before. However, Professor Trelawney's attitude towards Hermione was less than friendly. After examining Hermione's aura, she commented on its disappointingly faint presence, which infuriated Hermione. Harry, too, was not spared, as his reading hinted at an ominous black dog, echoing John's earlier prophecy and casting a shadow of pity over him, much to his dismay. Following the divination class, the mood was somber as they headed to Transfiguration. Professor McGonagall, sensing their unease, reassured them that divination often involved exaggerated predictions of doom. This comforted the students, until Neville hesitantly mentioned John's prophecy, linking it to actual talent. Professor McGonagall was taken aback, pondering the rarity of a true prophetic gift. Reflecting on Dumbledore's peculiar decisions regarding the electives and the unique item given to only one student, Professor McGonagall was left in deep thought. Dumbledore's cryptic warnings about curiosity and taboos hinted at his deeper knowledge of John's abilities and the challenges ahead. As the class ended, the students, unable to contain their curiosity, spread word of John's prophecy. John, now the center of attention once more, was approached by Malfoy, who inquired about the prophecy. John admitted his uncertainty, having spoken under an unknown influence, yet he couldn't shake off a sense of familiarity with the prophesied events, as if they were part of a larger narrative yet to unfold. This chapter not only advances the plot, but also deepens the mystery surrounding John's abilities and the implications of his prophecy, setting the stage for future developments in this magical world. John pondered whether his prophecy was beginning to unfold as he twirled a card between his fingers. This card, a gift from Professor Sybil Trelawney, was said to enhance the celestial eye. It bore a symbol resembling an eye, emitting a faint glow visible only to him. Professor Trelawney is indeed remarkable, John thought, reflecting on her offer to assist with a prophecy and the Tianmu card imbued with ancient magic. He safely tucked the card away, his mind shifting to the afternoon's Magizoology conservation class. Confident in his abilities, John was certain that under his watch, Hagrid wouldn't impulsively have students flying on thestrals. The sound of a commotion from Gryffindor caught his attention, and he turned to see Hermione storming off, visibly upset. Ron, the cause of her distress, seemed bewildered, unaware of the impact of his words. He had insensitively remarked on Hermione's supposed lack of talent in a subject she hadn't even studied yet. John shook his head in disbelief at Ron's obliviousness and Harry's sympathetic nod, thinking that their lack of insight was astonishing. Later that afternoon, as they headed to Hagrid's hut for the M-MOP Magizoology conservation class, John noticed the Slytherin contingent, including Malfoy, Daphne, Pansy, Goyle, and Crabbe, was present. The group's journey across the wet grass was interrupted by Malfoy's taunting, particularly aimed at the younger students. Daphne, unable to tolerate Malfoy's behavior, expressed her frustration to John, who wryly commented on Malfoy's naivety, earning an eye roll from Daphne. Upon reaching Hagrid's hut, the students were greeted by Hagrid, clad in a moleskin coat, with Fang by his side. Hagrid's enthusiasm about the day's lesson made John uneasy, knowing Hagrid's definition of wonderful could mean anything but ordinary. His apprehension grew as they neared the Forbidden Forest, a place with unsettling memories for many, including Harry. They stopped at a small paddock near the forest's edge, where Hagrid instructed them to open their textbooks. The mention of the Monster Book of Monsters caused a stir among the students, many of whom had struggled with the book's defensive nature. Hagrid, slightly embarrassed by his oversight, looked to John for assistance. Demonstrating how to calm the book by stroking its spine, John earned Hagrid's praise and gratitude, along with points for his house. As Hagrid ventured into the Forbidden Forest to prepare for the lesson, Malfoy began to voice his complaints, only to be silenced by John's dismissive glance. "Draco, just calm down for a moment," John said, signaling for patience as they awaited Hagrid's return and the start of what promised to be an unconventional class. Hagrid, now a professor, held the power to deduct points, a thought that irked Malfoy more than he cared to admit. The mere idea of losing points at the hands of someone he deemed unworthy was almost unbearable. However, Malfoy was unaware of Hagrid's lenient nature. The gentle giant was more likely to award points than to take them away. This misunderstanding forced Malfoy to bite his tongue and redirect his attention towards antagonizing Harry, drawing ire as if summoning a swarm of Dementors. During the class, a commotion stirred as more than a dozen magical creatures galloped towards them. These beings, with the bodies of horses, heads of eagles, and expansive wings, captivated the students. John, witnessing the scene, could only cover his face in disbelief. Hagrid, brimming with excitement, clutched a bundle of long iron chains and instructed the students to keep their distance. His eyes sparkled with joy as he beheld the creatures, exclaiming, "Aren't hippogriffs beautiful?" Eager to make his first lesson memorable, Hagrid had chosen to introduce the students to creatures classified as XXX dangerous. He singled out his favorite, Buckbeak, and began to explain with enthusiasm. "First things first, you must understand that they are creatures of great pride," he said, setting the stage for the students to interact with these majestic beings. As Hagrid scanned the crowd for a volunteer to step forward first, his gaze landed on John. After a moment's consideration, he decided not to impose on him. "Harry, noticing Hagrid's hesitation, and not wanting his first lesson to falter, volunteered himself. His gesture was not just about supporting Hagrid, it was also about embracing the opportunity to engage with the magical world in a way he had never done before. Chapter 117, Employees and Bosses. Well done, Harry, Hagrid praised with a gruff voice as he unfastened Buckbeak's leather collar, causing a wave of tension among the students. He instructed Harry, "You've already locked eyes with him. Remember, don't blink too much. If you do, the hippogriff might think you don't trust him." Harry immediately regretted his decision as he tried to maintain eye contact, his eyes beginning to water. Buckbeak, with his large, pointed head, returned Harry's gaze with fierce orange eyes. "Yes, that's it, Harry. Now bow," Hagrid instructed, his voice laced with caution to avoid startling Buckbeak. Reluctantly, Harry bowed, careful not to expose the back of his neck, and then looked up, keeping his head still. Buckbeak regarded Harry with a haughty stillness. Hagrid, a bit anxious, quickly advised, "Back now, Harry. Ease back slowly." He feared Harry might retreat too hastily, potentially offending Buckbeak. However, before Harry could move more than a step back, Buckbeak gracefully bent his scaly front knee in a bow. "Well done, Harry," Hagrid exclaimed, overjoyed. The lesson was proceeding better than he had hoped, and he was confident that everyone would enjoy this experience. "All right, you can pet him now. Try patting his beak," Hagrid suggested, his happiness evident. Harry approached Buckbeak cautiously and patted his beak, while John looked on, relieved. It seemed that even with a dangerous magical creature like a hippogriff, Hagrid's expertise was sufficient. Suddenly, Hagrid, in a surprising move, hoisted Harry onto Buckbeak's back. Confused by Hagrid's actions, Harry found himself soaring through the sky after Hagrid slapped Buckbeak's rear. Harry's flight was brief but exhilarating, and he landed with a mix of fear and excitement on his face. Seeing Harry's successful flight, Hagrid was encouraged and decided to let the other students have a turn. John chose a black hippogriff and confidently met its gaze, finding the process simpler than expected. The weather cleared, and Draco Malfoy, seeing the others' success, stepped forward, arrogantly ignoring Hagrid's instructions. John watched, concerned, as Malfoy recklessly provoked danger. Buckbeak, offended by Malfoy's lack of respect, advanced with steel claws bared. Hagrid shouted a warning, fearing the worst, but a red spell struck Malfoy before Buckbeak could reach him, sending Malfoy flying. "My hand! I'm dying!" Malfoy screamed, overreacting. Hagrid quickly calmed Buckbeak, while John approached the still howling Malfoy. "Stop overreacting. I used the disarming spell, not the killing curse," John said, pulling Malfoy to his feet. Malfoy, realizing he was unharmed, felt humiliated, especially under Daphne's disdainful gaze. "It seems you lack courage. Perhaps we should visit a haunted house next time," John remarked, his comment directed at Malfoy, but loud enough for others to hear. He then turned his attention to the other students who were considering following Malfoy's foolish example and felt a wave of dizziness. Thanks to John's intervention, Buckbeak and Malfoy's confrontation ended without injury. John spared Hagrid a glance, choosing not to comment on the incident. After all, it was Hagrid's first class, and John decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. The class ended without further incident, and John, who had intended to ride a hippogriff, ended up ensuring Hagrid's class ran smoothly. Hagrid felt guilty, realizing the chaos was his responsibility. After dinner, John suggested Hagrid adjust the class schedule to prevent similar incidents. Hagrid, recognizing the potential dangers, agreed to make changes. With the day's events resolved, John returned to the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets to gather some books. He spent the evening fervently studying in the dormitory, passing some of the material to Daphne for her assistance. On the third day of school, John was drawn to the commotion in the auditorium by the sound of screams. Upon investigation, he discovered the source of the uproar, a newspaper article reporting Sirius Black's sighting near Hogwarts, which had been witnessed by Muggles. John, however, didn't give the news much thought. Given the presence of Dementors patrolling the area, he doubted Sirius could pose any real threat, even with the use of complex potions to aid his infiltration. After breakfast, John noticed Heinrich's newfound caution while drinking, likely a result of his lingering unease from a previous encounter with garlic essence. The morning's potions class with Professor Snape revealed a noticeable shift in the professor's demeanor, particularly towards John. Snape's usual disdain seemed somewhat tempered, not quite as harsh as it was towards Gryffindor students, though the reason behind this change remained a mystery. John's skillful preparation of a shrinking solution earned Slytherin an additional 30 points, further extending their lead over the other houses. The afternoon brought with it the much-dreaded Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Given the department's notorious history of frequent instructor turnover, expectations for the new teacher were low. However, the mood shifted when Professor Lupin entered the room, his appearance at odds with the battered suitcase he placed on the podium. Announcing a practical lesson that required only their wands, Lupin immediately captured the students' interest, prompting them to eagerly follow him out of the classroom. En route, they encountered Peeves causing mischief by stuffing gum into a keyhole. As Lupin approached, Peeves, recognizing him, prepared to taunt him with a nickname from his school days. However, upon noticing John, Peeves's bravado turned to terror, and he fled in a panic. Lupin, surprised by Peeves's reaction, remarked on John's apparent influence over the poltergeist. John, for his part, could only offer a bemused response, having done nothing more than subject Peeves to a few spells in the past. This incident reminded Lupin of advice he'd received from Professor Flitwick, who had suggested consulting John, the previous year's Defense Against the Dark Arts assistant, for guidance. This recommendation now seemed particularly prescient. Their journey took them to the staff lounge, where they encountered Professor Snape. The tension between Snape and Lupin, a remnant of their shared past, was palpable. Snape's acerbic comments not only affected Neville, but also angered Harry to the point of violence. Before departing, Snape cryptically hinted to John that there was more to Lupin than met the eye, implying knowledge of Lupin's lycanthropy, a fact John was already well aware of, given his role in procuring Wolfsbane potion for Lupin. Snape's parting look suggested he recognized John's understanding, if only partially, before he left the room. This brief exchange left John contemplating the complex web of relationships and secrets within Hogwarts. The first lesson commenced, and at the far end of the room stood a familiar old wardrobe. It housed the boggart that John had captured the previous year. Their initial lesson focused on how to confront and handle boggarts effectively. Chapter 118, Vivid Lessons and Ideas. Suddenly, the old wardrobe began to shake. Professor Lupin anticipated this familiar scene might frighten the students, but to his surprise, they remained remarkably calm, leaving him momentarily taken aback. He addressed the class with a composed demeanor. "Don't be alarmed, there's a boggart inside." Scanning the room, he inquired, "Can anyone tell me what a boggart is?" Eager for the opportunity to earn points, hands shot up immediately. Among them were Hermione, known for her extensive knowledge, and John. After a brief moment of consideration, Lupin called on Hermione. A smile of triumph lit up her face as she quickly responded. "Boggarts prefer dark, enclosed spaces, often hiding in wardrobes, under beds, or in cupboards beneath sinks. They are shapeshifters, transforming into whatever they believe will scare us the most." "I couldn't have explained it better myself," Professor Lupin praised, much to Hermione's delight. He approached the trembling wardrobe and elaborated. "The boggart in this closet hasn't assumed a specific form yet because it doesn't know our fears. When alone, its appearance remains a mystery." John, however, seemed to disagree silently. He believed he had a unique insight into the true form of a boggart, having researched that shielding oneself with occlumency could prevent the creature from reading one's fears. He recalled an encounter where, under the cover of a disillusionment charm, he observed the boggart as a gathering of black mist, undetectable and formless. Professor Lupin continued, preparing to demonstrate. "The moment it is released, it will transform into what each of us fears the most. However, this gives us a significant advantage." His gaze swept the room, and despite Hermione and John's raised hands, he chose Harry, asking, "Harry, have you noticed this advantage?" Caught off guard, Harry hesitated before responding, "Because there are so many of us, it can't decide on a single form to take." His guess, stemming from intuition, was spot on, earning Lupin's loud praise. Disappointed, Hermione and John lowered their hands, the latter humorously contemplating a deduction in Lupin's hypothetical salary. Lupin, pleased with Harry's insight, shared an anecdote about a boggart attempting to scare two people simultaneously, resulting in a non-threatening half-slug form. The spell to repel a boggart is simple, but requires strong willpower, he explained with a smile. Laughter is what truly defeats a boggart. We need to force it into a form that we find amusing. With wand in hand, Lupin stood before the class, initiating the practice. Wands ready. Please repeat after me. Ridiculous. The students, finding this approach far more engaging than those of previous Defense Against the Dark Arts professors, enthusiastically joined in. Excellent. Remember, laughter is key to defeating a boggart. Now, Neville, it's your turn, Lupin announced, calling on a visibly nervous Neville Longbottom. Despite his apprehension, Neville stepped forward, demonstrating that bravery wasn't foreign to the Longbottom lineage. Lupin observed with approval, recognizing the courage within the young boy. Standing beside Neville, John inquired gently, Neville, what are you most afraid of in this world? Neville hesitated, his gaze shifting towards John before he whispered, Professor Snape. Professor Lupin couldn't help but chuckle at the mention, noting to himself how Snape's unpopularity persisted. Neville had initially considered mentioning John as well, but the stern look from John made him swiftly decide against it. Neville knew that if John discovered his fear, the training sessions would become even more rigorous. The mere thought of John emerging from the wardrobe as the embodiment of his fear was enough to convince Neville to stick to mentioning Snape alone. The revelation that Neville feared Professor Snape elicited immediate laughter from those around, given Snape's notorious reputation. John caught the amused glances of some Slytherin students and couldn't help but smile, thinking to himself about their apparent bravery. Professor Lupin, seizing the moment for a bit of mischief, suggested Neville imagine his grandmother's dress. As a former member of the Marauders, Lupin might not have been as wild as the others, but he certainly shared their Gryffindor bravery and penchant for humor. He then opened the wardrobe, which ceased its shaking and revealed its contents. John braced himself for the worst, half expecting Snape to emerge. However, the figure that stepped out, while resembling Snape, was not quite him. It was a boggart, taking on the appearance of Snape, but with a twist. As the boggart advanced towards Neville, its attire transformed into a garish ensemble of red and green women's clothing, much to the amusement of everyone present. The laughter reached a crescendo, with even Malfoy joining in. Professor Lupin's laughter was the loudest, his enjoyment of the spectacle evident. The boggart, now thoroughly confused, was faced with a succession of students, each confronting their fears and transforming the creature into various humorous forms. When it was Ron's turn, the boggart morphed into a giant spider, which quickly lost its legs to Ron's spell and tumbled around helplessly. The boggart's attention then shifted to Harry, but before it could fully transform, Lupin intervened, causing the boggart to become a silver-white orb. However, it didn't stay that way for long. As it approached John, the boggart began to change erratically, unable to settle on a form that embodied John's fear. The rapid transformations left everyone, including Professor Lupin, in stunned silence. It was clear that they were witnessing something unprecedented. John, curious about the boggart's true form, focused on imagining it. To everyone's astonishment, the boggart's frantic changes halted, and it retreated back into the wardrobe, effectively ending the confrontation. The class was left in awe, pondering why the boggart chose to flee. John mused aloud. It seems that even a boggart, capable of delving into our deepest fears, is reluctant to confront its true self. His comment left Professor Lupin pondering the outcome of the lesson. It was difficult to say whether the exercise was a failure, since the boggart had fled, or a success, given that John hadn't even used his wand. Ultimately, Professor Lupin decided not to dwell on it further. He awarded 5 points to Gryffindor for the day's lesson, recognizing the bravery and insight demonstrated by Hermione, Harry, Neville, and implicitly, John. Professor Lupin assigned the class an intriguing piece of homework, an essay on boggarts. Draco Malfoy, unable to contain his displeasure, loudly voiced his opinion that Professor Lupin was showing favoritism towards the Gryffindors. He pointed out how John, a Gryffindor, seemed to always catch the professor's attention, even when he raised his hand in a manner that was almost too deliberate to be genuine. This observation garnered a wave of agreement from the Slytherin students, who clearly saw John as their superior rival, always ready to champion their cause. However, amidst the brewing discontent, John's mind was preoccupied with a fascinating concept far removed from house rivalries or classroom dynamics. He pondered the nature of boggarts, creatures that had the ability to peer into the deepest recesses of one's heart, and dementors, beings that fed on a person's soul and joy. An intriguing thought struck him. What if he could combine the two? The idea seemed to ignite a spark of inspiration within him. His eyes gleamed with the light of newfound possibility, and a determined expression settled on his face. John was on the brink of an experimental venture, eager to explore the potential of merging the characteristics of boggarts and dementors. This revelation, though kept to himself, marked the beginning of an adventurous exploration into the unknown. Chapter 119: Capturing Dementors and Confronting Abstract Boggarts. A week into the term, Professor Lu Ping's exceptional teaching skills had garnered widespread acclaim across the school. The incident where Neville had managed to make a boggart, taking the form of Professor Snape, don women's clothing, was still a topic of hushed admiration among the students. This act of defiance seemed to compensate several times over for the numerous scoldings Neville endured in potions class. Professor Snape's glares, filled with malice, were now more frequent than ever, especially towards Neville, resulting in the loss of many points in Defense Against the Dark Arts class for trivial reasons. John, on the other hand, consistently excelled in his homework, earning Slytherin a significant number of points daily. His brilliance was undeniable, and even Professor Snape's attitude towards him showed signs of improvement. Heinrich, equally adept in his studies, remained unpopular among his peers. With an air of superiority, he distanced himself from everyone except John. His aloof demeanor and pale, vampire-like appearance only added to his mystique. Heinrich's penchant for casting malevolent spells on his detractors led to the deduction of points from Slytherin, much to the secret delight of his housemates. It seemed that individual grievances were bearable, but collective suffering brought a sense of normalcy. Dubbed the Vampire of Slytherin in whispers, Heinrich became the target of the twins' pranks, often involving garlic essence. Their rivalry escalated to a direct confrontation during a spell class, which only ended when Professor Flitwick intervened. As night fell, John stealthily left the dormitory. Instead of heading to the room of requirement, he ventured outside the castle, where Dementors patrolled. Aware of Dumbledore's advice that disillusionment spells were ineffective against Dementors, John relied on his mastery of occlumency to shield his emotions, rendering himself invisible to the creatures that fed on happiness. He targeted a lone Dementor, calculating its patrol route and setting traps along its path. As the Dementor neared, John allowed a sliver of emotion to escape, luring the creature with the promise of a feast. As it approached, he sealed his emotions once more, puzzling the Dementor. It was then that the Dementor encountered John's trap, a meticulously crafted box that appeared innocuous yet contained a powerful suction force. As the Dementor reached out, it was swiftly pulled into the box, which John promptly secured with numerous locks, ensuring no escape. Triumphant, John levitated the box and returned to the castle. This box, specifically designed to capture Dementors, was a testament to his ingenuity. His mission complete, John ventured into the Forbidden Forest and deposited the box in the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets, which he had transformed into a study. Surrounded by books on the soul, he sought information on Dementors, intrigued by their unique existence between soul and body, more formidable than ghosts. As he pondered the nature of Dementors, John's fingers brushed against a silver skull, a symbol of his deep dive into the mysteries of the dark creatures that haunted the wizarding world. John pondered the peculiar encounter between the boggart and the Dementor, the sound of their collision echoing in his ears. He glanced at the old cabinet next to the box where the confrontation had taken place. A curious thought crossed his mind. What form would a boggart take in the presence of a Dementor? With a flick of his wand, John cast the disillusionment charm on himself, followed by occlumency to shield his mind from any potential intrusion. The locks on both the box and the cabinet clicked open almost simultaneously. From the box emerged a Dementor, while a cloud of black smoke billowed from the cabinet, rapidly changing shape until it settled into the form of a black albatross, albeit a grotesque and distorted version. The two entities seemed to pause, as if taken aback by each other's presence. Despite lacking eyes, they exuded a palpable sense of mutual scrutiny. The Dementor floated aimlessly around the room, while the boggart, in its albatross guise, flapped its wings as if attempting to mimic something. John's lips twitched in amusement as he realized the boggart was imitating his Patronus. It was a peculiar coincidence that the Dementor present was one he had previously encountered on the train. The boggart's attempt to mimic the Dementor suggested that even these dark creatures harbored some form of thought or consciousness. Not wishing to witness any further abstraction between the two, John quickly used his wand to return them to their respective confines. As he sealed the box and cabinet once more, he sat atop the box, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "It's all very vague, suggesting that the Dementor's mind is clouded," he mused. "It's akin to dementia, or perhaps an issue with the soul. What's clear is that both entities possess abilities akin to legilimency." The complexity of his thoughts weighed heavily on him, and he sighed, acknowledging the long journey ahead in solving the enigma of Nagini's soul. John made it a routine to visit the secret room daily, dedicating time to unravel the mysteries of the Dementor and the boggart. Days turned into weeks, and on September 19th, an unexpected event unfolded in the Great Hall. Hermione, dining in the Great Hall, received a gift delivered by an owl she recognized as Basil. Harry and Ron watched as Basil navigated skillfully through the maze of dinner plates to deliver the package. Ron, reminded of his less graceful owl, couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. Hermione, touched by the gesture, discovered a beautiful glass ball within the package, containing a miniature starry sky. A card accompanied the gift, bearing a simple yet heartfelt message from John. "Happy birthday to you." Ron's initial reaction was one of sourness, a hint of jealousy in his voice as he remarked on John's thoughtfulness. Hermione, unfazed, reminded him that she had shared her birthday with them at the start of school, a detail they had evidently overlooked. Both Harry and Ron felt a pang of embarrassment, realizing their oversight. Harry, intrigued by the glass ball's apparent value, pondered how John, coming from a Muggle family, could afford such a lavish gift. He recalled the substantial loan John had provided him, further fueling his curiosity about John's financial means. Meanwhile, Ron's thoughts drifted to the practical use of the glass ball for his astronomy homework. Grateful for the thoughtful gift, Hermione sought out John to express her thanks. John, ever humble, insisted that formalities were unnecessary among friends. The conversation soon turned to Hermione's cat, Crookshanks, prompting John to inquire about its absence. Hermione shared that Crookshanks's penchant for chasing scabbers had necessitated keeping the cat confined to her bedroom, a decision that saddened her. This exchange not only highlighted the complexities of the relationships among the characters, but also underscored the depth of their connections and the challenges they faced, both mundane and magical. Scabbers caused quite a stir, which really upset Ron, so I ended up having to confine him to the bedroom, Hermione explained, her tone reflecting the tension of the situation. John nodded in understanding. "Well, it's only natural for cats to chase mice. It's hardly surprising with Crookshanks." He then glanced down to see Tom, the cat, darting around his feet with evident joy. At Hogwarts, aside from Filch's Mrs. Norris, Tom enjoyed a level of freedom that was enviable. "Hermione, I've noticed you spend a lot of time in the library. If you wouldn't mind, I could look after the cat for you," he quickly added, trying to mask his true intention, which was less about helping and more about his desire to pet Crookshanks. The cat's round, fluffy body seemed irresistibly soft to the touch. Hermione appeared hesitant, unsure if Crookshanks would be comfortable spending time in the Slytherin common room. Later that afternoon, she approached John again, this time with a sheepish expression. "Crookshanks doesn't seem too keen on leaving the Gryffindor common room," she admitted. "Okay then," John replied, trying to hide his disappointment. He had been looking forward to spending time with the uniquely charming, albeit somewhat scruffy, Crookshanks. He reached into his bag and pulled out some cat treats and dried fish he had prepared earlier. "Here, take these to him," he offered, extending the treats towards Hermione. Hermione looked at the small bag in John's hand, which seemed to contain an overly generous amount of treats. The gesture, though simple, spoke volumes about John's fondness for the cat, despite not having the chance to bond with him as he had hoped. Chapter 120, Hitting the Wall and Experiments. In Filch's office, a rare sight unfolded. Filch, with a content smile, savored his ice cream, while Mrs. Norris, his loyal cat, nibbled on treats from his other hand. For Filch, this moment was blissful. The flavor of his ice cream, mapo tofu, was an odd choice that even John found bizarre. It was a flavor that, if introduced in China, would likely be met with disbelief. This peculiar preference highlighted the eccentric tastes of European wizards, a group known for their unusual culinary inclinations. John, who had made it a routine to visit and groom Mrs. Norris, noticed something unusual in the drawer, a purple corner peeking out. Driven by curiosity, he reached out and retrieved it, uncovering a letter before Filch could notice. The envelope read "Quick Spell," and upon seeing it, Filch's face turned a mix of blue and purple. John, rather than feeling disdain, was filled with curiosity. It puzzled him why Filch, a caretaker at a magic school, would seek out a correspondence magic course. "Give it to me?" Filch's sudden outburst was filled with anger. He demanded the letter back and attempted to expel John from his office. Since Harry had discovered Filch was a squib the previous year, Filch had struggled with his identity. No one longed for magic more than he did. He had witnessed his siblings wield magic effortlessly, a constant reminder of what he lacked. This led to his expulsion from his family home and eventually to Hogwarts, where he found refuge. However, his inability to perform magic made him feel inferior, shaping him into a person who took pleasure in catching students' mistakes. John was an exception. Filch harbored no ill feelings towards him, mainly because John never flaunted his magic and, importantly, Mrs. Norris was fond of him. After being ejected from the office, John encountered Tom running outside. He advised Tom, much like a concerned parent, to be cautious of dementors. John surmised that Tom was likely searching for Fang and wouldn't venture too far. Distance, after all, has a way of diminishing attachments, and Tom's current indifference towards the large black dog seemed to confirm this. John then proceeded to the library, where he presented Mrs. Pince with a note signed by a professor and a box containing 2 ice creams. Mrs. Pince, initially indifferent, was taken aback by John's gesture. The ice creams were enchanted to remain frozen for days. However, her demeanor changed upon reading the note. "It's expired," she declared, pointing out that Gilderoy Lockhart's endorsement no longer held any weight. John, realizing his oversight, felt a wave of disappointment. It seemed his only option was to visit the library at night. As he passed by the faculty lounge, he overheard an exchange between Professor Snape and Professor Lupin. Snape's tone was dripping with sarcasm. "Lupin, it seems that the appearance of Johnny Silverhand has improved your circumstances. Thank you for your concern. His Excellency Johnny Silverhand is indeed a remarkable individual," Lupin replied, carefully choosing his words. Snape's mockery was evident, targeting Lupin's past struggles as a werewolf unable to secure employment. The mention of Johnny Silverhand, a figure known for his ruthless methods, made it difficult for Lupin to describe him as a good person. Snape, witnessing his former adversary's newfound stability, was visibly upset, a testament to their long-standing rivalry. "Lupin, don't assume I'm unaware of your true intentions here," Snape continued, his voice laced with accusation. Severus Snape ascended the staircase briskly, his proximity to Remus Lupin so close it was almost intimate. With clenched teeth and a voice laced with venom, he accused, "The moment that man escaped from Azkaban, you appeared at Hogwarts. Don't pretend it's mere coincidence." Lupin's gaze darkened, his response firm yet calm. "It is just a coincidence, Severus. Don't address me by my first name." Snape's tone grew darker, his warning clear. "I'll be watching you, Tukar, loosely. You've learned too much from Johnny Silverhand, that merciless man. Perhaps he even assisted you in freeing your dear friend." His use of "good friend" dripped with sarcasm, visibly affecting Lupin, whose eyes momentarily reddened. "That's enough. Don't continue," Lupin implored, his usually pale complexion turning even paler. Snape, his voice strained as if fighting back emotions, added, "You've never been on the right side. Not then. Not now." He was. Memories of a painful past momentarily overwhelmed Snape, prompting him to take a deep breath as the chill in his eyes intensified. Lupin understood the reference to Sirius Black's past misdeeds and chose silence, recognizing the depth of Snape's resentment. Snape, sensing his upper hand, left the scene with a disdainful click of his tongue, his departure as dramatic as a bat taking flight. Upon opening the door, Snape was confronted by John, his smug expression quickly souring. "Mr. Wick, eavesdropping is hardly appropriate," John remarked earnestly. "Professor Snape, I needed to discuss something with you," he continued, prompting Snape to suggest a change of location with a cold demeanor. In Snape's office, John's request to access the restricted section was met with skepticism and ultimately rejection, marking his third denial of the day. Frustrated yet undeterred, John resolved to find another way, his determination unwavering. Meanwhile, Tom, the loyal and agile dog, successfully navigated the secret passage beneath the humping willow, delivering food to a recuperating Sirius Black in the shrieking shack. Their interaction, marked by mutual affection, highlighted the deep bond between them. After facing multiple setbacks, John retreated to the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets to conduct experiments on Dementors. His attempt to separate a Dementor's soul from its body using a specialized spell initially showed promise, but ultimately resulted in the creature's dissolution into smoke, leaving John to ponder the complex relationship between body and soul. John massaged his temples, trying to alleviate the throbbing headache caused by the incessant noise. In an unexpected turn of events, he had accidentally killed one of the Dementors during his experiment, necessitating the capture of another. He mused. It appears to have a form akin to a soul, yet it seems more like it's pieced together from different parts. With no one else in sight, John took out a piece of parchment to jot down his observations, realizing he needed to capture another Dementor for his research. The box containing the boggart ceased its movements, as if sensing the ominous activities occurring outside. Boggarts, inherently cowardly creatures, typically transform into various forms to instill fear in others. Yet this one seemed to understand the gravity of John's experiments. Equipped with the box, John ventured outside the castle once more, employing his usual method to ensnare a Dementor. He resumed his experiments with a renewed focus, determined to uncover the mysteries of these dark creatures. After some time, the Ministry of Magic began to notice the dwindling numbers of Dementors. The decrease was subtle at first, but it soon became apparent that something unusual was happening. The Ministry's concern grew as they tried to understand the cause behind the sudden reduction of one of the wizarding world's most feared entities.